have enough stretch on it, did it? So that's where it should be.
That's not.
But they put it up here and people are reaching into it.
This is ridiculous. That should be down so it's flush.
Okay.
I hate this for years since they first put it in. Because I can remember coming in and speaking about the Dutch war before I was elected. And I remember you sitting there and nobody could see me because I'm not huge. Because I asked.
Hey, John, how are you? Good.
I was just going to sit on the stairs, but I asked if we could sit there was room for us here. Or
Get out of my seat.
there, yeah. Well, that's why I just went over and said, hey, you're in my seat. He jumped up and said, you can have it.
Yeah, we're going to wait for a few minutes and take it home.
Exactly. You know,
There they are.
it's too comfortable here, you know.
Okay, thank you everyone, and welcome to the West Flamborough Delegation meeting for Tuesday, April 29th. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to the council chambers and to the meeting this evening. In particular, I want to thank certainly all of our community members who are joining us this evening. This evening is in fact about you, and we want to hear from you. So we're very, very happy to see the amount of delegation requests that we've received this evening. So thank you for coming. Also, I do want to thank, as usual, all of our council colleagues that are joining us today. I do see Councillor Partridge, Councillor Basuda, and Councillor McCuddy. Welcome to a room you're very, very familiar with. So I just want to go through some of the rules and remind folks how the evening will proceed. So in front of trustees, we do have the rules in front of us. And what we do know in terms of our delegations, delegates have requested either 5 or 10-minute delegation. Timekeeping will be done through Heather, and I will signal the delegates when their time is coming to a close. From trustees, after each delegation, we do have a choice of either receiving the delegation or referring a particular item from the delegation to staff. My recommendation to trustees is if they're, instead of receiving each and every delegation, we can hold them until the end and receive them in bulk. But if trustees wish to do so individually, that is the choice of the mover, and we'll accept that. So once again, to the community members who are joining us as delegates today, certainly when your name is called, you will step up to the mic. If you do have some type of media, whether it's a PowerPoint slide or a PDF or video or whatnot, it is plug and play, so you can bring your memory stick with you to the front. If you do need assistance, I believe we have Ian who will assist. Ian, can you wave your hand? Ian is our tech guy, I guess, for this evening. And in addition to that, once again, I want to thank everyone for being here. I know as a board we have taken a number of steps to advertise these evenings. In particular, we've done voice broadcasts to our schools, we've done newspaper articles, newspaper advertisements, we've been on Twitter and every which way that we can contact our community members. So it's great to hear that the message did get out today. And once again, the meeting is about you. So any information that you'd like to share in terms of the West Flamborough art, we are more than happy to hear that. And just one final reminder of where we are in the process of the art reviews. And that is, as trustees have not yet weighed in on this particular issue. We did go through an accommodation review process where a community committee reviewed possible recommendations. There was a report that came to trustees about a month ago, making 2 recommendations in priority order. Trustees have also received a staff report with 1 recommendation, and at this point, trustees now have those 2 reports in hand with the recommendations, and we are happy to hear any type of response to opportunity, given the time remaining for trustee ARC questions pertaining to any ARC. And we do know last evening we were unable to get the answers to our questions from the previous week, so we'll start with those if and when we get to that item. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first delegate, Councillor Partridge. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me okay? What a wonderful crowd. Welcome. This is fantastic. First off, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the trustee members around the Horseshoe very much for the opportunity to come in and speak with you today. I welcome the community, and I also want to recognize my council colleagues who are here. And it's my understanding that your MPP, Ted McMeekin, the Honourable Ted McMeekin, will be arriving in the next short while. So it'll be wonderful to have his support here as well. Before I go on, and I'm not going to take 10 minutes, I know I've been allotted 10 minutes, but you really need to hear from the folks who are in the gallery. So I'm just going to take a couple of moments. I want to recognize Trustee Karen Terpstra. Karen, for the last 8 years, we've had the pleasure of working with you, and you will be missed. But I wanted to personally thank you for everything that you've done for our communities. It's greatly appreciated. So you will hear from residents, you will hear about traffic issues, you will hear about whether to build, you'll hear about the health and safety of the children, particularly in the Millgrove community. And I am here mainly to support keeping Millgrove School open, and I think as you can see, thank you, folks. And I think as you can see that it's a popular sentiment in the room. I do want to, just for the benefit of all those in the room who may not know, I represent Ward 15 Flamborough. And Ward 15 Flamborough includes Waterdown, Carlisle, Millgrove, parts of Freelton, and it goes all the way over to the border with Greensville. So I do have residents that live on Harvest and on Fallsview and on Sydenham who do attend the Greensville School as well. And in fact, I attended Greensville. I grew up in Greensville. So welcome to any Greensville residents who are here, and the rest of Flamborough as well. So I want to really zero in on the ARC meetings that I attended and talk about the process. It was wonderful. Each meeting that we attended, there was 100, 150, very well attended by the community. And there were representatives from all over West Flamborough, including Millgrove. And just to clarify again, the students who go to Millgrove School are not just residents of Millgrove. We share a boundary all the way up to Guelph. So there are many students that live up near that boundary, past Highway 7, past the 12th concession, who sit on a bus for about an hour to get down to Millgrove. And there's a great deal of concern that if indeed we close Millgrove, if that decision is made by you folks to close Millgrove, that those students will need to be even longer on a bus to go all the way down to Greensville. So we are going to advocate to keep Millgrove open. And at the ARC meetings, particularly the last 3, there was a great deal of support in the community. As I say, with over 100 people attending these ARC meetings, the majority of the support was to keep Millgrove School open. At every ARC meeting, we had parents from Beverly, parents from Dr. Seaton, who stood up and said in the meetings, we believe Millgrove School should stay open. That's a pretty powerful endorsement from the broader community of Flamborough. So I know you folks weren't all at those ARC meetings, but it's important that you understand that and that you hear that. It was a complete surprise to the residents of Millgrove when after the last ARC meeting, where they had, for meeting upon meeting, been told by the community that Millgrove was supported to stay open, they were shocked when after the last meeting, what they heard was indeed the complete opposite, and it was for the board to consider closing Mill Grove. So I'm going to let the residents come down and speak their passionate endorsement for what they want, for what works in their community, because that's what's important, is that we have a solution that works for the community. And I include Greensville in that. We want a solution that works for Greensville as well. If we can get a smaller new school in Greensville, I would love to see that. We can strengthen the music program that you have there, the science program. It is second to none. It is absolutely fabulous. And the Mill Grove curriculum, of course, you're going to hear all about that, because again, those students, the teachers, they just achieve so much for that school that it makes sense to keep it open. So thank you for your time. I very much appreciate it.
And then just to remind trustees as well as our delegates, we do, with our rules, have up to 5 minutes of questions for clarification to the delegate. So that is an opportunity if a trustee has a question of clarification. But once again, following the delegation, I'm not necessarily looking for a motion now, but that being said, if there is a referral to staff or follow-up, that is acceptable at the end of every delegation. So thank you, Councillor Partridge. We appreciate those words. Next on our list, number 2, is Jay Bainbridge. If Jay Bainbridge can come on down.
Good evening, board members and trustees. My name is Jason Bainbridge. I graduated from Mill Grove School in 1987. Currently, I have 2 children attending Mill Grove and another one slated to attend in 2015. When our first child was born, we enrolled her into the Mill Grove Children's Center, even though we were not living in Mill Grove at the time. I knew it was just going to be a matter of time until we did, and I wanted my children to be a part of the Mill Grove community before we even lived in Mill Grove. I believe that speaks volumes about how awesome the community is, as well as how amazing the seamless childcare solution in Mill Grove is. Mill Grove Public School is the nucleus of this community. It is within the halls at Mill Grove School that such amazing groups like the Mill Grove Cares Committee are able to learn who needs help and how to help others within our community. This community activism, like the Mill Grove Cares, not only helps those in a time of need, but it helps teach our children about caring, compassion, and a sense of community. All of this in addition to the terrific academic learning that our children receive at Mill Grove Public School. It is reasons like this that we have chosen to live where we do, and having a school in Mill Grove keeps our community growing and thriving. In a city that is striving to be the best place in Canada to raise a child, I urge you to all do the right thing and keep Mill Grove School open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Next we have B. DeSalvo. B. DeSalvo. There we are. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vanessa DeSalvo. I have children at Beverly and Seton. I want to start by saying thank you to the people that gave their personal time up for the ARC process from all 5 schools. I'd like to ask the trustees to visit or really understand where our schools are located, since we're often forgotten about in Flamborough, and to know what the conditions are before making any decisions on our school. I am a mother of 3 whose children have been in the Hamilton Wentworth School Board for the past 10 years. I've truly enjoyed my children's experience at Beverly Central and Seton. I have loved our small school and the personal environment that they experience. But I'm also real on what's happening in our society. No one in this room would keep their house if they knew the bank was going to be taking it. I realize that is hard to swallow, but I have attended many school meetings over the past 10 years and have learned a lot. Our children's education is from the teachers, parents, and students, not the building they're in. My community lost 2 schools just 11 years ago Linden and Sheffield, and here we are again needing to shut more down. I am not sure all projections are correct since our school numbers have not changed since my children have attended. I do not want another 10-year plan, but a 50-year plan. We do have aging schools and in need of many repairs that don't meet today's standards. What do I support, and many from my community? A brand new school with all the resources that the city children receive. Where do we want it? In a central location. Which is why we support the ARC and the board on the Beverly Community Center site. We realize this means working with the city, but we believe this can be done. This is the heart of our boundaries and gives our children so many more opportunities. We have the community center and the arena there, which is what we use for our festive skate every December. There is football, soccer, and baseball fields, and so much green space on this site. Our children are so far out in the country that they miss out on many opportunities that city kids get to do. If our school is closer, they have a chance at more experience that schools should bring. There are 401 children in our two schools, 172 at Beverly and 229 at Seton. But realizing 75 children of the Seton kids come from the Beverly boundaries for 6, 7, and 8, which means there's around 225 children from the Beverly boundaries, and that's why the new school should be between our two schools. We also have 100 kids that come from the Linden area, and remember, we closed that school. With closing these two schools, the only thing the children did gain was more straight classes. So what do we want this time? It is a new school with all the classrooms to house all the children. Okay, I lost my train of thought. To house our children and to keep our music and French rooms and programs. Have a great library and a computer lab. To have a gym that meets 2014 standards. Since our senior volleyball team could not play their semifinals this year in their gym, since our Seton gym does not meet code. They had to travel into the city to play these games. They are all Hamilton Wentworth District School Board students, and they should have all the same facilities. We currently have 18 classrooms in use at Beverly and Seton, with music, French, computer, and resource rooms. We do not want to see the board underbuild a new school since this has happened before. I realize that Queens Rangers is not part of this arc, but Beverly and QR are only 7 kilometers apart, and Beverly is 4 kilometers from the boundary. We should be considering them in our new school since the location puts QR children 5 to 8 kilometers from this site, and we have kids currently traveling 20 kilometers away from our school. The board has listed QR on an arc, and I'm just asking to consider and review it with that school. I would like to touch on our busing. We currently have 16 buses at our two schools.
One minute.
Okay, I'm fine. We currently have 16 buses at our two schools. We would like transportation to give us our 45-minute runs. This was brought up at rural schools and to be mandated, and it has not happened. We are concerned that if we do join, we will lose buses and runs will be longer. But we have runs that are an hour from the time they pull out of the school till they hit the last doorstep. This is a great amount of time for children to ride the bus. Remind yourself, do you commute to work that far? In closing, our community has come together on this, and many support a new school at the Beverly Community Center site. We are asking you to give our children the same facility as the city kids. The board closed 2 schools in Dundas, and they receive Osler. We will have closed 4. I have been repeatedly hearing more students means more program, more site facilities, and more resources for the children and teachers. I ask you to live up to that. Our amazing teachers could do so much more. Build Flamborough West a 450 pupil school on Beverly Community site, and know we will have a school that meets today's standards and can take us into the future.
Okay, so next on our list, number 4, is Councillor Masuda. Councillor Masuda, please come on down. And just to let folks know, if they do see themselves on the agenda list coming up, perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 people in advance, feel free to come to the front, just so that way it's easier to get you to the mic quicker. So over to you, Councillor Masuda, and welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairman White. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and to the trustees who are around the table, and our trustee, Karen Turkstra. I started to write something. I spent the last few days writing, and then I'd stop writing and I'd write, and I didn't know how to put it together. So I just got a couple notes here, but I'm going to speak from the heart. And just some background. Myself and my wife, we have 7 children who went through the school system here in Wentworth. They actually went to Balaclava School and then to Wardown High School. Rural schools. My oldest is a nuclear engineer. The next one's a school teacher, teaches at Dr. Davies here in Hamilton. The next one is he's a full-time military. He's had 15 years in military out west. The next one, she's a graphic designer. The next, our daughter, she's in cardiology. And then we have 2 more that are finding their way. They're 19 and 23 and 19. And so it's quite a challenge for them right now. But it just goes to, for me, it shows me the rural way of life, the rural schools, and how kids can progress and take an interest and move forward in the world and give to the world. So my ward, Ward 14, is, since Councillor Partridge has indicated the kind of the lines, but my ward is, some people know this and some don't, but it's west, number 6 highway, to Wellington County, to Waterloo, to Brent, to the 403, and comes up around, and then Oldfield Road is the dividing line there. Oldfield Road up, across is Millgrove Road, where Moffat Road is, and then up to the 6th concession back to number 6. So I do have Dr. John Seton School, Beverly Central School, Spencer Valley School, and Greensville School in the ward. And then the Fulton kids on my side, children, they do go to Councillor Partridge's school, your school, a lot of the Millgrove people here to that school. So I have a lot of parents, a lot of kids in my ward that go to all these schools. A little background. Todd, how much do I have?
You have a good 8 minutes remaining.
Okay. So that's what it feels like to be on this side. So I can tell you that we just heard a delegation speak about Beverly Community Center for a school site. I can tell you that Karen Churchta and myself have been working very hard together with city staff and the school board to try to work a school in on that site. There has been difficulty with the city of Hamilton and school boards working together. I truly believe that this site, and if we work hard enough, we can get a school there. It would work great. It would work great with the soccer fields, the baseball, possibly use the football, the ice rink. There's some things we can do there, and there would be funding from the government to go towards this beyond the school board. So it's a good mix, and we're working on that very hard to do that. The Millgrove school site, as I say, I support small schools, the rural way of life, and I personally would like to see the Millgrove stays open. I don't feel building a 500-plus school in Greensville would be suitable. It's just too many kids in a group, okay, for a rural way. The busing issue from Maddaw Road, Gore Road, touching Wellington County, it's about 19, 20 kilometers to get to Greensville, whether it be Spencer Valley, Greensville School. But when you start doing the concessions, and a lot of the concessions dead end, so you have to make your way around. And we are talking more than an hour and 20-minute bus ride. I kind of calculated more or less on my own, because I live up at that end down there too. We have to really consider putting the kids on the bus that long. We have chosen to live in the country, for some of us long distances from many amenities. And when the kids are going to be on the bus for an hour and a half, even 45 minutes is enough on the bus. And then extracurricular activities, going with the kids somewhere, it's so much more traffic. It takes away from the family life. So we have to really consider this, and I'm hoping that the board and the trustees listen to this and we move forward on it. I picked up something. I did a lot of research on the internet, Google, that's my favorite thing, and something came up here. Many excellent small schools pass into history before their time, in many ways taking the communities with them. When schools close, children are bussed up the road, families fall apart, their lives change and find themselves driving to more centralized activities away from their homes, spending more time on the road and less time building family and building community. I had a conversation with Minister McMeekin yesterday, and he had indicated to me that there's a good chance potential funding for 2 new schools in our wards. Minister Liz Sandals had indicated that they would try to accommodate us for 2 schools, which is a good start. I think that sounds positive. So he wanted me to pass that along. I know the Minister McMeekin is coming here. And another thing, there was some populations projections, and I attended all 5 ARCs. We had 5 ARCs. I attended all 5. There were some populations projections by the board, and it shows our populations going down as far as attendance enrollment for kids. I think it's going to, from looking what I have found in some of the city statistics, it shows populations going up. Not a lot, but up, because we're greenbelted. But we have small communities, settlement areas that are going to grow somewhat. We have older generations on the farm and rural properties. They're going to be moving off. We're going to be having younger families coming in. It's going to happen, okay? Might not be in the next 2, 3, 5 years, but within the next 15 years, there's going to be an increase in population. So it's something to take into consideration for the trustees and the board, that I think that's going to come back. That's my personal feeling, and I'd be willing to gamble on it. But I'm here to support Millgrove School. We need to keep it open for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Basuda. Next, we have S. Kyles. S. Kyles. Seeing none, we'll move next to number 6, D. Arbuckle and C. Matthews.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair.
If you could just state your name. So we can
Sure, I'm D. Arbuckle. I'm Dave. I'm Dave Arbuckle. Thanks for having me this evening. Callie Matthews, who's our, I'm representing Greensville School Council. Callie Matthews, who's our chair, couldn't be here this evening. Callie did an extremely amount of heavy lifting during the ARC review process, so I'll give her a break for abandoning me tonight. And just so you know, I'm not checking Twitter. My remarks are on my BlackBerry, so wasn't able to get to a printer today. So just indulge me as I look down at my BlackBerry. I see a good number of parents here from the Greensville community today, which is great to see. We felt it was important for us as our school council to be here to represent the parent community as far as Greensville is concerned. Greensville has a really strong history of interest and engaged school councils that work very well with school staff and the parent community at large. This is my 5th year on school council at Greensville, and I'm always constantly impressed by the input that we receive from parents and the willingness of our principal and staff to improve our children's educational environment where they're able. I have 10 minutes registered, but I certainly won't be taking that full amount of time. I am here to support both the staff recommendation and the ARC committee recommendation that proposes the closure of Greensville, Millgrove, and Spencer Valley with the construction of a new school for these students. I'm really going to start off by saying that I think nobody really wants to be here. I think the ARC process is typically one that is unnecessarily and unfortunately divisive. It often pits communities, neighborhoods, and even parents against each other, which is unfortunate, I think, for everybody. In a perfect world, as parents, we choose a school and a community that would provide a stable and predictable educational experience for our children. But as we all know, it isn't a perfect world. As you committee or trustees know, school boards have limited resources at their disposal and are under constant pressure to reduce costs and do more with less. That pressure comes from the provincial government, but it also comes from the citizens who don't want the board to spend money maintaining classrooms that are partially empty. And I think that's the reality that you deal with, and I think that we need to really understand. It's an important context to know that the ARC process is first and foremost a financial exercise to reduce a major cost associated with delivering education, and that is capital and maintenance. The ARC process at its very core is not really an educational discussion, and in my view, it's not a community capacity exercise. It's a financial exercise at the end of at its core. So I believe our job as a parent community is to provide a different perspective. It's to understand the fact that the ARC is a financial savings exercise, but to try to shape it, mold it, influence it to ensure that it meets the needs of the student community as a whole, as well as helping the board with its objective, which is a bottom line objective. It is our view as a school council that the recommendations closing the 3 schools and constructing a new school meets the collective needs of our entire community. We think it's important to emphasize that under the recommendation, there are consequences for the Greensville community as well. Greensville Elementary is 170 years old. Let's think about that for a second. 1848. I was doing a little bit of council pursuit. I was on Google today too. And the Communist Manifesto came out in 1848. That tells you how long ago we're talking about. So while my family and I are relatively new to the community, there are 3rd and 4th generation families that have all attended Greensville and benefited from the education they've received at that school. You know, there are still many parents in our community who are struggling with the concept of a community landmark like Greensville, a 170-year-old school, could be closed. And you know, you'll likely hear from some of those parents this evening, or you've seen it within the correspondence. The attachment to Greensville, however, is more than just a historical attachment to an old building. A number of investments have been made at that school, such as classroom and library renovations and new playground equipment that have improved the educational experience at that school. However, if we move beyond the historical significance and other factors that are directly impacting Greensville students, we believe that there is an opportunity to turn this seemingly negative predicament into a positive situation that will benefit the West Flamborough community as a whole in the short and the long term. Supporting a new school that is completely utilized brings with it additional resources, additional programming, and presumably an enriched educational experience that is currently not provided to our children. These benefits will not just be for Greensville students, but for all the students that are impacted by the board's decision. This being said, we understand that there are no guarantees that closing 3 schools will automatically produce a new school. That's a decision that needs to be made by the trustees and by the board. However, we believe the chances of securing new funding for a new school are dramatically improved if the proposed new school has a higher projected utilization, both in the short term and the long term. I don't really think it's our place as a school council to really get into the numbers and the data that has been used to inform the process. I think some other people may bring that up and there may be some questions in relation to that. But I will simply say that it is our view that the numbers support a consolidation of 3 schools into a brand new school in our communities. So in closing, I just want to make one last point. You know, I'm here speaking on behalf of Greensville School Council, but personally, I don't want to see Greensville closed. And again, this speaks to the fact I don't think any of us really want to see our schools closed. I think it's a great rural school with a hardworking staff that seeks to prepare our children for the future. Plus, it's about a 7-minute walk from my house, which is perfect. But this decision shouldn't really be about what I want or any individual parent or specific community wants. I think it should really reflect a compromise. I think it is incumbent upon the board to make a decision that's in the best interest of the entire community of West Flamborough. A decision that achieves your objectives from a fiscal responsibility and a student needs perspective for today and decades from today. It's our view that the staff and our recommendations to build a new school does just that. Thank you.
Next, number 7, T. Christian and S. Van Aikman. A familiar name.
Good evening. Trustees and Chair of the Board, thank you for taking the time to listen to our delegation. We are here to speak with regards to the West Flamborough ARC Part 2, dealing with Greensville, Spencer Valley, and Millbrook Public Schools. While we still fully support the decisions made by both the staff and the Accommodation Review Committee, we have heard the outcry of our neighboring community of Millbrook. We do have empathy for their angst and have used these same arguments they are using to defend the Greensville community. We are here to voice our support of option 2B of the ARC proposal, but are recommending building the new 350 pupil place school on the Greensville school site, thus merging Spencer Valley and Greensville school communities and leaving Millgrove status quo, still feeding into the new school for grades 6 to 8. This will bring the utilization of the consolidated school to 102% upon the merging of the communities. The Greensville site is in the heart of our community. The site size of Greensville Public School, as per the Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board report, is 4.85 acres and will easily house a 350 pupil place school. We have seen this firsthand by touring Guy Brown in Waterdam, which sits on a similar plot size with a 621 pupil enrollment. Greensville boasts newly built sidewalks, which facilitates a safe, walkable environment for 23% of the current student population, as per the SIP. It can be expected to increase the walkability percentage with the merging of both schools. Spencer Valley currently has a walkability of 10%. With the increased walkability comes a decrease in transportation costs.
Directly adjacent to the rear boundary of the Greensville property will be the new Johnson 2 Park, which is a 37-acre community park and arboretum. I'd like the members of the board they can take a look at the plan, which is on the 6th page of their package. It will be Hamilton's first city-owned arboretum. It will be put to tender in May 2014 with an expected completion date of the end of this current year. The Arboretum will have 1.8 kilometers of paved trails for walking, cycling, and will be wheelchair accessible. It will also host an open outdoor educational amphitheater. This park will provide additional educational spaces to be utilized by our school community and the community at whole. There's also the potential for future gardening partnerships and learning opportunities, and we feel this would be an amazing opportunity for our community. And for those in the galley that aren't aware, this park is directly touching the Greensville School property. Also a short walk from the Greensville site, we find Webster's Falls and Tews Falls, which are currently utilized by the Greensville School on field trips and year-end celebrations. Both are within a walkable distance. The benefits of this walkability is something that we in Greensville can utilize, and others we see being bussed in constantly, other school boards bringing their children into these amazing sites. With regards to the financial breakdown, we could assume that the cost of a new 350 pupils place school on the Greensville site would cost the same as what's proposed on the new build for the Spencer Valley site, with no new land acquisitions required. And the financial analysis data is in the director's report, page 13. We would also like to reiterate that there be no transitional spaces or waiting in transition, that all construction be completed prior to the transition, as per the West Flamborough ARC's report on page 14. Board would like to thank you for taking the time to hear our proposal. We understand how difficult this decision-making process is for you, but we encourage you to consider our plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Councillor McCaddy. Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And it is strange to be on this end of the microphone, isn't it, Councillor Pursuta? We're usually sitting around a horseshoe, so I see my Ward 1 spot is empty there, so there's a hat there. That would be appropriate, McCaddy and the hat. So that's very good. The reason I wanted to be here tonight is that we've been through a very difficult ARC process in Ward 1 a couple of months ago, looking at Prince Philip School in Ainsley Wood and George R. Allen School in Westdale, for those of you who know that area. And I know what you're going through in terms of the emotions in the community that come up in these kind of circumstances when a school is threatened. And when we're talking about a school being threatened, it's really the whole neighborhood, the whole community that feels threatened in that circumstance. And that was certainly the case in our situation. And of course, the trustees are in a very difficult position as well, working with the provincial rules and working with limited funding and trying to make the very best decision. So it's a difficult decision all the way around. I also have the opportunity to sit on the City Council and the School Board Liaison Committee, the joint committee between the Council and the Board. And that really provides us with an opportunity to look for ways to work together much better than we have in the past, if I can say that. And we heard earlier from several parents, and certainly Councillor Pursuta, about Beverly Community Centre, a city facility. And is there a way we can make that work also as a school site with the added advantages on both sides of the city school board areas? And that's something we have to do to look for those win-win situations. And it sounds like there are other opportunities for that as well, both in this area, and we have other ARC experiences coming up as well. Mr. Chair, as I understand, East Hamilton is coming up in the Central Mountain as well. So those will be other opportunities to look for that win-win situation. When I look at the three school areas being talked about tonight, I look to my colleagues, Councillor Partridge and Councillor Pursuta, for guidance on this. And it does seem like there's some significant opportunities around the Beverly site, the Beverly Community Centre site, and also on the Greensville School site. And I also wear the hat of being chair of the Hamilton Conservation Authority. And we're certainly keen to have the children using the Chews Falls, Webster's Falls area, Spencer Gorge. Those are beautiful areas, and that's exactly the kind of education you want your children to have, to be exposed to that incredible natural area and the incredible numbers of birds and other species that are found in that area. So it does seem like a good idea in that case. The other area in Millgrove seems to me, and maybe it's fair from Ward 1 to look for a complete community, and a complete community is only complete with a school. So it's clear to me that Millgrove needs to stay. Those of you who know some of the work that I've done here at City Council over the last decade know I'm involved in heritage protection activities as well, cultural heritage and natural heritage protection activities. And it goes without saying that Millgrove wins on that side too, with the incredible 99-year school, as I understand it, 100th year next year, if I've got that right. So that's very important as well. So I'll just close by saying that although I'm a Ward 1 councillor, an urban councillor in the city, my master's degree is in rural planning, and my wife's a rural doctor. So I've got a funny contradiction in those different things, different experiences I bring here. And I'm just really heartened by the turnout tonight and the incredible involvement of the different communities, Millgrove, the Greensville area, the Beverly, larger Beverly area, and that part of Flamborough as well. It really bodes well for a healthy community, a healthy overall city, the rural area, the urban area coming together. So thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you again, Councillor McCaddy. Next, we have D. Madison. Please step up to the mic.
Thanks a lot. It's actually Mayton.
Mayton
Is the pronunciation.
I have an assistant here who is helping me with pronunciation, and so far I'm failing. She's right.
It's happened all the way through school. It happened. I'm here. My name is Bob Mayton. I'm a social worker by background, social policy. And I'm here because I'm really concerned about the trend towards larger schools. I'm running as a board trustee, running board trustee in wards 13 and 14, West Flamborough and Dundas. And there is this trend which I'm really concerned about. And I think when I was at a meeting 3 weeks ago of the school board, I heard a justification for larger schools over smaller schools based on academic performance, which I really thought was problematic, and so I went into the research a little deeper. What I found was that the historic research verdict is quite clear. Small schools work better for our children, for those who teach them, for those who care for them, and for communities as well. And in fact, small schools are much more cost effective because of significantly better learning and achievement outcomes. Years of research bear witness to small community schools as being safer, They have better teaching opportunities. They show higher academic performance than large schools in the research. Perhaps more surprisingly, small schools also perform at least as well and often better in areas of equity, in curriculum choices available for students, and in cost efficiencies. Some of these findings are quite surprising, but that's actually the research evidence. I plan to outline findings in each of these areas. The research reported here does not address the effects of long-distance school busing on children and parents. We do know that the costs for the board and the stresses of busing on children and families are significant, and these costs reinforce even further the case for small local schools than I can present here. On the issue of safety, research shows that students in smaller schools experience less violence. They report feeling safer. They attend school more frequently, and they are more attached to their school. In large schools, there is more fighting, there is more peer intimidation, and there is more bullying, according to the research. In teaching conditions, teachers in small schools feel more committed and connected in their teaching. They report higher job satisfaction, and they share a greater sense of responsibility for ongoing student learning. Small schools having less hierarchy permit teachers more say in what happens in the school, and they promote more personal and supportive relationships with peers, with principals, with the students, with their families, and with the community. On the Academic Performance Index, there's a common presumption that large schools, by virtue of having more standardized programming and testing, and also by virtue of having more advanced courses, are more rigorous academically. However, quite the opposite is actually the case. Students in small schools consistently outperform students in large schools on standardized achievement tests, and significantly so. Researchers overwhelmingly report that students learn more in smaller schools. Research also indicates that students in small schools get more course units before graduating from high school. Further, research shows that parents in small schools are closer to each other, and I think we have evidence for that tonight. They're more involved in their children's education. And parental involvement, of course, is a critical factor in student success, and that came out in the Spectator series that we saw a couple of weeks ago. On the index of equity, we know the board has been very concerned about equity, that is, overcoming student disadvantages to learning, such as poverty and discrimination. It's often thought that big schools are great equalizers in this area, that they provide a more equitable learning experience for students than small schools can. It's thought that big schools more naturally mix together children of different ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, and that in large schools, disadvantaged children are exposed to a more diverse peer group and to more options to help them to overcome limitations and to achieve more of their potential. However, research indicates that large schools are not at all the answer to inequities, and in fact make them worse, in part because of the tendency for students from different localities and cultures to hang together and form groups and cliques which separate them from each other. Small schools, on the other hand, tend to bring diverse groups together much more effectively because of close personal relations. Broad literature reviews of the sense of connectivity and safety at school indicate that learning is more equitably distributed in smaller schools. Do large schools offer more learning choices and curriculum? Not necessarily. In vital respects, small schools actually provide students with more choices in their learning. Increasing school size, especially beyond 400 students, does not typically result in a large increase in curricular offerings. How do we explain this rather surprising finding? One reason is that much of the material covered in specialized courses at large schools can be taught effectively in regular programming at small schools. Large schools also require more management of programming, which reduces the resources available for actual course deliveries. Not such a problem in small schools. Small size also enables teachers to provide hands-on learning opportunities that help students engage in rigorous academic work. The proportion of high school students involved in co-curricular and extracurricular activities is higher in small schools, perhaps far higher Greater percentages of students in small schools play on a team or study in an honors course. In fact, more students in small schools get involved in more than one of these activities. Finally, new technologies are beginning to reduce the need for the physical presence of students in courses. Small schools are clearly best at meeting student interests and needs, so they can offer a combination of interactive distance learning to expand course choices and opportunities, and hands-on help in the school as well. And finally, do large schools provide economies of scale? One might assume that a larger school equals less cost because of economies of scale. But if the criterion used is not low cost, but cost effectiveness, there is a clear advantage to smaller schools. The cost savings of larger schools are only apparent if the results are ignored. The costs associated with large schools are very serious, and they include increased dropout rates, increased violence, decreased sense of social safety and connectedness, lower teacher satisfaction and higher teacher turnover, lower achievement in college after graduation, and less happiness. At present, many of the above costs are not considered actuarially, but they are real nonetheless, and they should be quantified. In conclusion, student and adult relationships in small schools are stronger, they are more trusting, and they are more ongoing than in large schools. Small school parents are more involved in smaller schools, which is a critical factor in the higher student success in small schools. Small schools have leaner administrative structures. Besides lower costs, this enables the whole faculty to share in decision making. There's more flexibility for teachers. Teachers and students in small schools report feeling a greater sense of personal efficacy. They really have a say. Finally, smaller schools more readily engage members of the broader community in schools. Small schools attract community members to exhibits of art portfolios or to visual or performing arts showings in much greater numbers than large schools. Research shows that the verdict is quite clear. Small schools work better for our children, they work better for those who teach and for those who care for them, and they work better for our communities. Thank you.
We do have a question for clarification, so if you could just come back for a quick moment. I'd like to recognize Trustee Bishop.
Thank you.
Yes.
So much of the research on large schools is actually based on states. Did you take your research from states?
This is American research. There's not a lot of research in Canada.
Through the chair. So basically,
Through the chair?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Mr. Chair. There is not a lot of research in Canada about the impact of larger schools versus smaller schools on these issues, but the evidence is clear in the U.S.
Thank you. And my next question is, how do you define, Mr. Chairman, how is a large school defined in the United States literature?
That's something you
in the secondary and in the elementary?
We're talking about a comparison. We're not talking about a threshold of small versus large. We're talking about the relationship between the two. What they did is they took samples of smaller schools and larger schools. The exact numbers of larger and smaller schools I'm not sure of, but the comparison was a valid one from my understanding.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, commonly large schools within the states are students in secondary schools that are more than 2,000 pupils or even larger than that. They are very large secondary schools. So was actually the experience of reading the literature, is that the kind of large school at the secondary level that he came across?
Thank you.
I don't think that's really the issue. I think we're talking about smaller the school, the better. The larger the school, the worse. And I think that's the real issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next presentation is number 10. Is that a third good? And I believe there is a package that is going to be passed around.
Sure, thank you.
Make sure it's the same one for her, right? So Sarah just choose which one she wants me to do.
Just while we're getting set up, I will say I'm not sure how I drew the short straw in such a tough act that I have to follow. So I'm going to do my best here. But wow, like I'm concerned in terms of me as the first Millgrove parent coming up and having to follow that act. So hopefully I do a good job and do my fellow Millgrove parents justice. Thank you. So good evening. I'm Zara Thurgood. I'm a parent of 3 children currently attending Spencer Valley, Parkside, and my youngest is in kindergarten at Millgrove School. 5 churches, fire hall, community centers, library, a speedway, ballparks, play areas, general stores, gas stations, auto repair shops, bakeries, and restaurants. Who are we? We are the communities of Freelton, Strabane, and Millgrove. The largest geographical boundary of HWDSB, with a northward reach of approximately 25 kilometers from 4th Concession stretching to the Pushlinch border. Albeit on the other side of the street, we even have a Tim Hortons. We're not just rolling hills and landscape. We are a fabric of residential areas with a strong community focus and a population of approximately 1,500. A population that contributes taxes, yet we aren't afforded the same road infrastructures and services that our neighboring urban communities require. A great deal of our Flamborough community needs are supported via funds from independent parties such as Optimist, Lions, horticultural societies, etc. We don't complain, not much, but we do expect a tax-paying voice when it comes to the potential closure of our local community-based school and the education of our children. Over the years, we have seen several closures of rural-based schools in our neighborhood. We continue to be pushed into urban dwellings because of defined processes and boundary restrictions. These urban dwellings are also ones where we have no community affiliation. These rigid processes and reviews have little regard for our rural tax-paying voices, and we, as a rural community, are ill-represented in this process. The potential closure of our local school for our younger grades is already having a direct impact in our community, and in time will have a direct impact in our local economy. Here's a quote from a real estate agent that recently showed a Freelton home, and the clients were considering making an offer. This is what they had to say. Here's the feedback I mentioned for my clients not moving forward with an offer. If I didn't see that school closure sign and call the board yesterday, we would have been good to go. Local school access for their young children was a Freelton home sale deal breaker. I ask you, please, to take a stand, make a difference, and redefine how our rural communities should be treated and considered in this process. There is an element of uniqueness that comes with reviewing a rural school district and must play a factor when making a school closure and consolidation decision. Of note, the Millgrove School closure petition received 100% of parents' signature and support. Millgrove School boasts over 100 parental volunteers, both in the school confines and external in the immediate area, where parents and local community members alike come together to help families in our neighborhood through various programs such as our MCC, Millgrove Community Cares,
where we help people in our community in the good and not so good times, such as job loss and illness. In addition, our community-based work is also visible through other programs, such as our monthly sub-day lunch that supports our local Millgrove-based Subway business, our weekly pizza lunch program that is currently being personally delivered to the school by a Millgrove resident, our readathon that connects us with local authors. This year, our children achieved an outstanding 64,000 minutes of reading, 89% participation, and raised over $3,000 for the school. We also saw our principal, who I saw was here, taped to Millgrove's wall. We have a 30-year tradition of an annual turkey dinner and skate, and so many more. We operate with a strong sense of community spirit because this is our community. This is our neighborhood. Millgrove has enabled many local community partners through its environmental programs and landscape companies, Artisan for School Board projects, local musicians supporting music programs, to name a few. These types of local partnerships will reduce, likely become non-existent as you increase school sizes and a new geography of a proposed new school location. That is not to say your proposed new school wouldn't generate own partnerships. However, these would not be our community-affiliated partnerships. Unlike other HWDSB school sites, we also haven't required the extended childcare options. Having direct access to a solidly independently owned daycare facility next door to the Millgrove School. Closing this school will likely take a toll on this business and leave a gap for many families that seek the convenience of on or close to school site daycare operations. Millgrove School is structurally sound, with great foundations complete with a rich history and heritage, and is a central point in the current school boundary with a JK to grade 5 school population of 178. According to your facilities index data, our school, from a fiscal and financial standpoint, require the least expense to be maintained for the next 5 and 10 years. This only highlights the viability of the option in the current ARC recommendation of keeping Millgrove open, status quo. Millgrove's location enables 16% of the student population to walk to school and enables fair bus distances for our younger grades. Even with extra buses being added, as was presented to us at the last ARC review meeting, the bus rides to and from Spencer Valley School will be excessive. We have accepted the longer commute for our older grades, but the prospect of this travel and commute for children ages 3 to 10 is outrageous and is an utter conflict of two of the ARC's criteria, value to student and value to the community. I would further suggest that this should also be in conflict of the third ARC criteria, and that is value to the school board, i.e. with the health and well-being of all students, and yes, this means our rural-based students as well. I, like many others here tonight, would be amiss if I did not mention another prime consideration of Millgrove School and the forefront of all our educational offering accountability, and that is Millgrove's long-standing academic reputation, where all students achieve their full potential. Not might, not perhaps, not maybe. Millgrove has a proven, long-standing academic track record. To summarize the key elements I am raising tonight, specifically in correlation to the ARC's criteria: value to the student. Maintain our younger students' rights to be educated to the best of HWDSB capability in a familiar and community-based environment, and continue to encourage and support this aspect of their education. Maintain our younger students' ability to get in school in the same amount of traveling time as they currently experience to ensure their time in the class is productive. Value to the school board. Please don't close a rural school for the sake of boundaries and processes. Respect the education needs of your rural students and communities in conjunction with your own findings for the lower financial cost of keeping Millgrove School open. Value to the community. Continue to be an enabler of supporting local community groups, whether it's through the excessive amounts of parental volunteering or giving back to affiliated rural communities, our neighbours, our neighbouring businesses. Value to the local economy. This just highlights one example, but again, through the continued and long-standing partnership that the school has with the almost 365-day-a-year independently owned daycare facility, supporting the all-round children's growth and education in familiar and school-integrated surroundings. We are looking for your commitment on behalf of all tax-paying members, which includes our rural tax-paying members of the public. We request that you carefully consider the short and long-lasting impacts of closing yet another rural-based school and how this decision would really fit against your ARC criteria. Furthermore, we would like to recommend you of your March 24th, 2014 Director's Report notification related to this ARC review process, wherein it was stated, and I quote, "All participants in this process were committed to the same objectives of ensuring suitable and equitable learning environments for all students." Thank you for your consideration and continued commitment.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Delegate. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a question for clarification. So if you could return, thank you for that. Trustee Johnstone.
Through the chair, and thank you very much for the presentation and the very informative package. I just have a quick question on page 7, and I really appreciated the information about the Child Care Center. But on page 7 of your package, you said that the staff proposal includes 360 new transitions annually, and this is in regards to child care. I just wondered if you could explain that further, what that meant.
Can I request that you defer that question to one of my colleagues who's going to be talking, because they're actually speaking specifically to that.
Okay.
So I don't know who it is.
Yeah, at the bottom of each page, there's a name.
There's a name. There's a name on the bottom of the page.
Well, actually, the next delegate, so it's Teresa Radke, who I believe is 2 speakers from now.
Okay.
So perhaps we'll,
Yeah, she's going to go into more detail on that.
Okay. Is there, do you have a further question, Trustee Johnstone? Or we'll hold that question. Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker we do have is Jay Diamond. Please come on down. Oh, you're here. I like this. Make my job easier. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jessica Diamond. I am a parent. I have 2 children at Millgrove Public School, one in grade 4 and the other in grade 1. I chose Millgrove for 3 reasons. It was within a 5-minute drive from my home. It has an amazing, seamless childcare operation that works in conjunction with the school and makes my life as a working mom so much easier, and it has a phenomenal reputation. I knew about events such as the Turkey Dinner and Skate and Go for Green before my children even entered the school because they were thought of as community events. I am also the chair of the Millgrove Parent Council. I was a member of council last year when the board put us through the boundary review and said that they needed to hear our voice. I also sat at the art committee this year and attended what seemed like endless 3-hour meetings. I was at the final public meeting where the Millgrove voice was loud and clear, but ironically this so-called valued voice was then silenced at the next art committee meeting. And I am also a teacher, a student success teacher more specifically in a different board. Student success, isn't that the primary objective of education? Isn't that why the government is funneling millions of dollars a year into student success initiatives? How can we get our students to reach their full potential? How do we keep them engaged? How do we produce healthy, socially conscious children who will be productive members of society? I promise you, this doesn't come through brand new buildings. We all know that it is much more complex than that. I'm not saying new buildings are not needed, but they are not always necessary, and in the case of Millgrove, socially irresponsible. As a teacher, I am always looking for best practices, looking at what works and why. Last year, my vice principal and I made a trip to one of your board's alternative education sites. We were starting a new alternative education program to try to meet the needs of our most vulnerable students in our school, and knew that your board had some great restorative justice practices, and we wanted to learn from you. That is what business is about, and what education should be based on, learning from those who are showing results. Ask yourselves, last year alone, how did Millgrove achieve their EQAO results with 100% of the grade 3s achieving the provincial standard and above for math, while the board results were 59%? They also achieved 100% in writing and 93% in reading, while the board was 73% and 64%. Why were we featured on the cover of the Elementary Teachers Federation magazine for our Go for Green initiative, with a 6-page article within highlighting our incredible outdoor classroom? We are a standard to strive for, a non-transferable standard. Let's look at EQAO. I'm not a fan of standardized tests, but having done extensive work with grade 10s and the OSSLT, I know that these tests require a village to help all students reach their potential. My daughter was a part of the grade 3 cohort. That's 30 grade 3s, not 15 or 18 students, 30, that achieved at or above the provincial standard in math and writing. To clarify, this was not just about 2 grade 3 teachers who clearly taught to the test, as I have heard. Is it about these 2 teachers? Absolutely. No one is questioning those 2 amazing women who took the time to work with each student one-on-one to recognize their strengths and weaknesses and focus on areas for improvement. But it's also about the kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 teachers who collectively set the bar high and allowed students to perform and achieve. But we all know that true success is much more complex than city-high EQAO results. Are there great teachers at all schools? Of course. But not every school has a family of teachers. And I don't use the word family lightly. Family involves trust, communication, safety and security, and going above and beyond. There is a high standard that the teachers set for the students, but also for themselves. There is a culture of allowing each student to reach his or her own potential. And when new teachers come in, they become a part of this cohesive unit that strives for excellence. Students with individual education plans for learning disabilities or behavior, medically fragile students, those out-of-the-box thinkers, the at-risk boy who needs hands-on learning and movement, the young girl with anxiety, the athlete, the future world leader, all of these students have their social, emotional, and academic needs met at this exceptional school. It is exactly what the Ministry of Education mandates, success for all, to use their language. It is the belief that every child, regardless of gender, race, socioeconomic status, disability, etc., has the opportunity and the right to achieve success. And it takes a special environment to become a model of success for all. Many parents will argue that it starts with great teachers. Many teachers will argue that it starts with great parents. It is truly about both. It is about great teachers and involved parents forming a partnership, joining as a community to support every child. It is about Millgrove. You can feel it around you tonight. This is not replaceable. Furthermore, when the Art Committee presented the recommendations to the trustees a few weeks ago, a comment was made that bigger schools have bigger school councils. I would wholeheartedly argue against that. There are schools with close to 2,000 students. I work at one. And they are scrambling to get parents involved. Parents don't always feel connected to their children's school. At our first parent council meeting this year, we could barely all fit in the library. We don't just have a few parents that lead our school community. We have an entire community that leads our school community. As I was reading through all the Greensville correspondence letters to the trustees for both Spencer Valley and Greensville schools, the common thread emerged about what was best for the Greensville community. There were even several requests to have a smaller school built on the Greensville school site because of its location within the community, and that makes sense. But we don't live in Greensville. Some of us live almost 30 kilometers away from Greensville. Our young children are not connected to Greensville. They are connected to Millgrove. It is all about community. 21st century learning. This term is throughout the board's website and was brought into every conversation during the ARC process. It was one of the guiding principles within the ARC. Unfortunately, within these 2 contexts, it should be termed 21st century facilities, not 21st century learning and not 21st century thinking. New and bigger schools may improve facilities, but certainly not learning or thinking. Millgrove uses authentic and flexible opportunities to achieve 21st century learning. Because our teachers are a part of our community, they are therefore part of the fabric of our ecosystem. With close, meaningful, safe relationships with our children, strategies are proactive and become organic in this environment, as opposed to an artificial list of directives linked to facilities or technology. We have e-learning, we have blended learning, we have iPads. Technology has been welcomed. However, more importantly for JK to 5, the critical and creative thinking skills that are needed are being nurtured to help Millgrove students continue to navigate their 21st century needs and to learn any technology in the future. My daughter in grade 4 could design you a web page if you asked her to. But if you were to ask her to describe her school, she wouldn't talk about the iPads or the e-learning. She would talk about times when the school has worked with community partners, such as when each class made a mural to be hung in the gym windows outside our 100-year-old historic school building that represented respect, empathy, and community. She was so proud of that mural and of her school. She would talk about the Carolinian garden that the school community planted and its diverse habitat. She would not talk about the technology. She knows the technology. But for students in JK to 5, that's not what they will remember and not how they learn best. Instead of linear thinking and following funding formulas, use critical thinking. Put a value on Millgrove as a unique and exceptional learning environment that we all realize, and don't just try to shove us into a linear model. Let us be different. Don't just talk about accepting diversity, let us be the exception. Please allow Millgrove to stay open. Allow Greensville and Spencer Valley their new 350 pupil school on a site that best suits their community. A beautiful 21st century facility that our grades 6, 7s, and 8s will feel welcome and happy to join. But to close a school such as Millgrove, whose facility condition index is better than each school in the West Flamborough Arc, whose utilization is at 81%, whose JK to 5 students are thriving and achieving in a 21st century learning and thinking environment that is supported by 100% of our school community, would be socially irresponsible. Thank you.
My name is Teresa Radcliffe-Levin. My children are the future of Millgrove Elementary School. Regarding seamless childcare, Millgrove School enjoys an optimal solution. The existing partnership with the adjacent licensed childcare facility, the Millgrove Children's Center, known as the MCC, is a true working model. The MCC exceeds board standards, offering licensed childcare from infancy to 12 years of age, daily, 12 months of the year, with the exception of staff holidays. 47 programs currently operate on school property across the board, 25 which are run by the board's preferred partner, Umbrella Family and Child Centers of Hamilton, also known as Umbrella. Less than 25% of these programs offer service to families on PA days, the holiday season, March, and summer school breaks. Both Greensville and Balaclava Umbrella programs do not fall into this category. When programming is not provided, parents are left to seek alternate childcare options. There are many holes in the seams of childcare offered by the board and its preferred partner. In contrast, seams are sewn skillfully and securely by the MCC. Further, as the MCC serves the youngest population, Millgrove School has no need for the school's first childcare capital retrofit funding. Although there may be a large variation in actual costs based on historical data from the board, this present partnership is perceived to be equivalent to over $250,000. As this retrofit funding is not required by Millgrove, these monies can be distributed to other communities in need. In reviewing cost, Umbrella is deemed to be nonprofit, but MCC fees are less than all full-time service comparisons, except in one case. Further, Umbrella families pay nearly $75 per month more for some spaces. As a licensed childcare operation, the MCC complies with all legislative and regulatory requirements and holds a purchase of service agreement with the city, providing subsidized childcare to families. Additionally, the MCC boasts bright, stimulating indoor environments, accompanied by extensive shared outdoor play spaces, regularly receives 100% in its annual licensing process, has loving and dedicated staff, and provides tailored family and childcare service. The unique partnership MCC has with Millgrove School must be recognized in the West Flamborough Arc. The early learning strategy is priority for the board. There is a goal to work differently with community partners to consider seamless support and experiences for families. Millgrove meets this goal, as well as their vision for a childcare facility where children are healthy and secure, emotionally and socially competent, eager, confident, and successful learners, and respectful of the diversity of their peers. Daily transitions will increase from 4 to 6 by relocating our children to a larger school within the Greensville area. This equates to 10 more transitions per child per week. The province's childcare modernization plan speaks to sharing conversations, strengthening partnerships, and working together. The Millgrove community is already there. The plan also promotes putting children and families first. As a parent of children who have participated in Hamilton's Best Start program and attend the MCC, they should be permitted to attend Millgrove School. In reality, the school catchment definition has been altered many times over the past few years, resulting in tremendous grief to affected families. To provide an example, in the 2011-2012 school year, as per March 1st, 2011 administrative memo to all elementary school administrators, kindergarten students in licensed daycare facilities were deemed in catchment, provided they were registered and attending a licensed facility. Last year, between January 7th and 21st, this rule was changed, and all MCC daycare attendees, whether already attending JK at Millgrove or wishing to start in September, were forced to attend their home school for this academic year. 15 MCC families were negatively impacted by this decision. It doesn't feel like this change in rules reflects putting children and families first. The board must understand parents are feeling forced to make alternate plans for their children's future and are considering accessing services provided by the Catholic School Board, enrolling children in private schools, opting to keep children in their current daycare setting longer and not sending them to JK or SK, or they are rethinking their employment status. Children and families must be put first. In closing, I share a quote from a mother who fought tirelessly last year for her JK-age child to have the privilege of attending Millgrove School this academic year, but was ultimately denied. Their family now enjoys seamless care with the MCC, but not within the board. Her quote, "This kind of integrated approach to childcare, school, and community is a model that any town or school board should hold up as a beacon of light." Further, Millgrove is an example to the entire board as to how things could be better for families if partnerships were made and communities came together to raise children.
Thank you. That is time. You're finished. Just double checking.
One little bit.
If you have one final thought, by all means, go ahead. You're so quick to the podium.
You, the esteemed trustees of the board, have the power to keep Millgrove School open, to show commitment to quality programs for all children, to provide support and choice for children and families, to encourage sharing conversations, strengthening partnerships, and working together, and to put children and families first.
Next on the list, we do have I. McLeod. Perfect. Step up to the mic. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Ian McLeod, resident of this community for close to 25 years. Former parent council at Millgrove School, former co-chair at Allen A. Greenleaf, and currently parent council member at Waterdown District High School. I'm not going to show many statistics. What I would like to talk about is how unique Millgrove is as a school, how important Millgrove is to the community, and how the community is to Millgrove. For example, I will take you back a year ago from this time, when the whole community was gearing up towards an event dedicated to one of its own. A very special member of the community was in need of help. 2 educators, 1 teacher, at the school and a former employee of the school stepped up and organized a blood donor clinic in support of one of Millgrove's own. The event was a huge success, as well gained the attention of the surrounding communities. This is a shining example of the relationship between the school and the community. The staff at Millgrove is very dedicated to the community and have made many friendships within the community. There is a welcome feeling when you walk in through the halls of the school. One can tell there's a strong morale within the staff, and that can only enhance the dedication towards educating their students. Furthermore, the teachers have won attendance awards 4 years running. Some teachers can also be seen power walking through the community on their break, taking time to stop and chat or even wave at people in the community. The teachers run many extracurricular activities. For example, Millgrove loves music, starting with our kindergarten teacher who regularly leads the school in song, grade 4 students writing their own songs, dance club, recorder club, drum circle, dance-a-thon, and the highlight of the year, air band competition. Millgrove enjoys a high rate of participation in activities: track and field, readathon, dinner and skate, recently the colorful artwork on the school, and the unique Go for Green. The grade 5 class does not leave the school unnoticed. They are well prepared for middle school. They graduate with a ceremony including academic and other awards, a yearbook and DVD memories of the year, and memories of an amazing year, including a trip to Tim Hortons camp. It is not unusual to see these grads return to the school to help with other school activities such as open house and fun fairs. Bear with me. Why does the board, staff, support rural school of 525 students when this is out of the norm? It is unclear. Millgrove is not only a rural school, it is a small school. It is the norm that small schools usually boast many of the attributes such as, and I will echo Mr. Meaden, higher achievement for all, higher participation in co- and extracurricular activities, superior morale, more leadership opportunities, better attendance, lower dropout rates, fewer discipline problems, a greater feeling of safety, improved relationships, more parental involvement, more public confidence, more satisfied teachers, a better working environment, and increased speed of decision making. Thank you. Look around you. Many of the people you see here today are here to support Millgrove School. And many, like myself, no longer have children attending the school. We are all passionate. You must understand how important this school is to our community. The school celebrates its 100th anniversary this year and did not start out as the school you see today. Not common knowledge, but it started as a 2-classroom facility with a small library upstairs. In closing, I would like to say, Millgrove Public School is not just a school in the community, it is a community in the school. Thank you.
Next we have our staff co. Welcome to the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Safko, and I am a parent of 3 young children, 2 who attend Millgrove and 1 attending Spencer Valley. I had moved from Waterdown 7 years ago after my custom home was built in Frilton, and knowing that a school like Millgrove was there, it made my investment into my home that more appealing. Knowing that if I were to sell my 5-bedroom home, I could rely on the fact that another family could see our area as a great place to raise their kids. I love the closeness of the stores in Waterdown, even Guelph and Cambridge. The 401 highway is just minutes away. and with an acre lot where your neighbors are close, yet far enough for private backyard gatherings. I don't want to live on a postage stamp lot. I live in Canada, the second largest country in the world. Why not enjoy the landmass and the country around it? I worry now about my investment, seeing that Millgrove School could be history. Let me focus on the transportation aspect of why Millgrove should stay open. The amount of time a child rides the bus needs to be greatly considered. Ride times have a direct link to students' success. This is a statement from the Ontario School Bus Association, and I quote, "A long-standing study found that if a student spends more than an hour on a bus, there is a reduction in achievement in standardized test scores. This trend was confirmed in a recent study that found very long rides reduced students' sleep time, recreational time, academic attentiveness, and extracurricular participation. The universal complaint by all students is the loss of choice in activities and the overall loss of sleep. It is the recommendation from the board that bus rides do not exceed 60 minutes for one way. The Hamilton Wentworth Student Transportation Services does not currently follow this policy. How can we trust the board to provide equitable solutions for our children?" Here is a letter from the HWSTS showing my son Robert arriving home at 3:53 p.m. with a school bus load time of 2:30 p.m. This is a 73-minute bus schedule on his way home. My other two sons that attend Millgrove load the bus at 3:05 and consistently arrives home at 3:30, making time on the bus of only 25 minutes. Wes Chapman, living by Concession 8 West on Highway 6, departs from home at 7:15 a.m. and arrives at Spencer Valley at around 8:30, depending on the weather and road conditions, a 75-minute trip. His sister Kirsten leaves at 8:05 and arrives at Millgrove at 8:30, a 25-minute trip. Now, because of these long bus routes, safety becomes a factor, and especially the increase in bullying. The driver would have to deal with these factors, which would take their attention off the road. Now, for all of you who have children, and most of you do, we love the trip to the cottage, but hate the long trip when there are young children involved. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Should I go on? Young children can't handle a long time just sitting. We know this. And we know how irritated they can get, especially after a full day of school and an early wake-up. Can you imagine an hour-plus trip for a 4-year-old every single day of their school year? And that's for only one way. A total riding time in 1 month of 40 hours. That is equivalent to 1 work week on the bus. Now, I don't mind extracurricular activities, but what I find the board is attempting to do is make up a new study course. It is called Commuting 101. I have driven my son's route home, my son going to Spencer Valley, and the distance covered is exactly 36.7 kilometers. Now, to put this in perspective, this is the same distance as driving from my house in Filton to the junction of Winston Churchill and the 401 in Mississauga. It's exactly the same distance. Or, for you those in Greensville, driving from Spencer Valley to just east of the 403 and Highway 5. That's where the Home Depot is and the power centers. That's the same distance from Spencer Valley to that area. We're into Mississauga here. Again, this puts you into the Mississauga region, and if anybody has made this trip, you know that it consists of exactly 41 stoplights. I don't know if you counted. Being a very large catchment, the direct drive to cross it is approximately 24 kilometers. This cannot be changed It's there, it's geography. Unless parts get amalgamated into another district, but I don't think that's going to happen. My son already has more than an hour bus ride home. Adding more kids into the bus, again, JK to 5, would make the bus ride even longer. More stops, and with younger children, and with these younger children, these stops can be up to 2 minutes long by the time they get off their seat, off the long steps, etc. Being a rural area, we don't have 10 or 15 kids at a stop. It is usually just 1 or 2 kids. So let's see, fill the bus with 66 kids, and the time for each stop, I'll just do the math here. Adding more buses still does not decrease the time, unless the bus driver just slows down instead of stops to let the kids off. But I see newspaper deliveries using this concept, but that's not really what we want to do here. Driving the same distance as Mississauga, my son endures 28 stops before he gets home, and that is only with grade 6 and grade 8s to grade 8s on his bus. Add the extra kids from Millgrove to this same bus drive. Can you imagine taking the Mississauga trip on Highway 5 and stopping at every single one of those lights? 41? This is what we are planning for our kids. We plan, as adults, our own work commute to be as short as possible, but as adults, we try to manage it and chalk it up to being just part of the job. Arriving at home exhausted from the workday and the commute, what do we want to do? We want to sit and relax and not bother with work or even to prepare dinner. But we force ourselves to do so. Do we want this for our children ages 3 to 10 who want to get into after-school activities? This new Commuting 101 course is certainly going to train our kids well. It's hardcore training in a bouncing, noisy, uncomfortable, non-air-conditioned vehicle. We as adults have the option of a nice, cozy, comfortable car to make our commute that much more tolerable. A special note, my son made an observation. He's in grade 7, but he observes on his bus ride home that the grade 8 students take up 1 seat each, leaving the others to cram into the other available seats. It's a true story. I can only imagine what would occur when you start to mix the JK to 5 students into this territorial type bullying on a long and irritating bus ride. Now, just got to pull some. Why did I bring a tomato? Foodland Ontario is promoting that transportation of our fruits and vegetables need to become shorter. You hear this all the time. Yet our school board is not striving to achieve this with our children's transportation times. Shouldn't we give the same goal to our kids as we give to our vegetables?
Yes.
All I know is when young kids spend a long time driving, they get pretty ripe. I tell you. Shop local, let's school local. So in closing, consider quality of life for these students and the ill effects on health that long rides can have. Consider students' ability to be successful in their studies and don't impair their ability to concentrate once arriving at the school. Consider the early bus boarding and lack of sleep that increases behavioral issues. And consider the bullying and other negative behavior on extensive bus rides. I pay $9,000 a year in property tax. This is double what my brother pays in Waterdam. Yet he has access to schools just around the corner. I always thought you get what you pay for, but in this case, I'm wrong. Thank you very much.
to Robert Safko. It's rather, I would be willing to do a motion to refer this because I'd like to be sure that those distances and on the transportation are not to suggest that they're not accurate, but I'd like some scrutiny over those distances because that is a concern, just to be sure about transportation. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to do a referral for that.
Okay, so that's a referral to that particular item. That's moved by Trustee Brennan. We have a seconder for the referral to staff on that item. Trustee Hicks, any comments or questions on the referral? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Any further comments or questions, or rather questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Tricia Waldron. Welcome to the front of the room. You may go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Waldron, and I, like most people here tonight, am a concerned parent. In 2010, my husband and I moved to Freelton so that our family could enjoy the benefits a rural neighborhood has to offer. An integral part of that decision was the education of our children. Millgrove has an outstanding reputation as evidenced here tonight. Had that not been the case, we would have moved elsewhere. In 2016, my 3 children will be 10, 7, and 4. If the board decision is to close Millgrove and send our youngest children to Spencer Valley, a school at the very bottom of our catchment area, this means my children will be almost 25 kilometers away from their school. Currently, Freelton children attending Spencer experience bus transportation times ranging from 25 to 75 minutes one way. Add up all that time. At that upper limit, that's over 2 hours per day, and that equates to 50 hours per month of sitting on the bus. Currently, that is just the experience of our older children, but in 2016, that will be the experience of my 4-year-old. And to me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, that is just unacceptable. What are the health risks associated with all that time spent on the bus? In my professional life as a health research methodologist at McMaster University, I gather, evaluate, and summarize research evidence so that it can be used to inform practice and benefit the public's health. This is what we call closing the research to practice gap. So what is sedentary behavior? Why does it matter? What is the evidence? And what should we do about it? As a definition, sedentary behavior is a class of behaviors, such as prolonged sitting, playing passive video games, and motorized transportation by car or bus, characterized by very little physical movement and low energy expenditure. In children, the benefits of exercise are overwhelmingly clear. Regular physical activity is associated with physical fitness, motor skill development, coordination, better bone health, and the list goes on. The hard truth is, though, our children as a whole are failing miserably where physical activity is concerned. Only 5% of Canadian children aged 5 to 11 are meeting the Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines, which recommend a minimum of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. Further, they spend an average of 7.6 hours a day in this age group being sedentary. There is accumulating research showing sedentary behavior is associated with poor health outcomes. And these effects are actually independent of physical activity levels. In 2011, a systematic review was published which evaluated the best available evidence on sedentary behaviors in relation to various health indicators in school-age children. That review evaluated 293 individual research studies that included almost 1 million children, and it concluded the following. Sedentary behavior for more than 2 hours per day is directly associated with unfavorable body composition, including overweight and obesity, decreased cardiorespiratory and musculoskeletal fitness, lower scores for self-esteem and pro-social behavior, and weak academic performance. For each indicator, a dose-response relationship was observed. That means that lower levels of sedentary behavior are related to improved outcomes. These results hold true for all study designs that were included across all countries using direct and indirect measures and regardless of study size.
1 minute.
These compelling results prompted the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, in cooperation with the Public Health Association of Canada, to develop the Canadian Sedentary Behavior Guidelines for children. They're as follows. For health benefits, children aged 5 to 11 should minimize the time they spend being sedentary. And I'll direct your attention to the second recommendation, which states, this can be achieved by limiting sedentary motorized transport, extended sitting, and time spent indoors throughout the day. It's also recommended that key stakeholders, including boards of education, increase public education around the health consequences of being sedentary and consider the travel needs of children when deciding to close or build new schools. Board trustees, I implore you to not ignore the evidence on sedentary behavior and comply with these guidelines provided by our national public health authorities. Closing Millgrove School would mean increasing sedentary behavior among our youngest children for amounts of time that are significant, and thereby placing them at increased risk for negative health outcomes. I ask you, would you want this for your child? Keeping Millgrove open is in the best interest of our children. A wonderful school in a central location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have S. Travers. Thank you. And just as the delegate is coming up, just to let folks know, we are going to take a 5-minute break after the next three speakers. So after number 18L Teed, we will be taking a 5-minute break. So that being said, Ms. Travers, the floor is yours.
I think I need a footstool. Dr. Malloy, trustees. My name is Sharon Travers. I have worked for this board for 33 years. I just retired in June of this past year. 19 of those years were in Millgrove School, and the last 5 years were teaching JK and SK children. Millgrove has an unbelievable parent, grandparent, and community involvement, as seen by volunteering in the classroom, to our annual Go for Green, to our dinner and skate, and on and on. Even my husband has worked endless hours labeling trees in the gardens, teaching children about plants and animals, and in making our Carolinian garden wheelchair accessible. We have numerous trees out there. We have butterflies. We are taking care of the butterflies. If you've read in The Spectator a couple of weeks ago how the monarch butterflies are threatened, well, Millgrove School has planted milkweeds in order to make sure that this does not keep occurring. We have a nurturing habitat for all kinds of animals. We have a large grassy playground. The children love it. In around 1998, a delegation from China came to our school from the Sichuan district. They heard about our school from Trees of Canada. The children learned about different plants and trees, and by talking through an interpreter, different children were able to talk about our playground and what was happening in that playground. The children came away with an awful lot of information, and these delegates then went back to China to try to put in place a playground like ours. This playground is an extension for all grades, starting from JK right on up. You will see children out there reading books on the benches outside that the parents have put there and made them actually. You will see teachers reading to students out there. You will see children gathering chrysalises to bring them into the classroom in order to study the monarch butterflies and then let them go, thereby seeing the life cycle in nature. We have phys ed out there all the time. Children are writing, the grade 3s are constantly doing procedural writing on our playground, which I know is a buzzword. It is rare to ever have behavioral issues on our playground. Have you ever been to see our playground? If not, I strongly suggest it. My greatest concern are the youngest children, the ages 3, 4, and 5, and the impact on them of the long bus ride, an hour plus. After 1 hour plus, children are very tired, not wanting to engage in learning, focus, or participate. The very purpose of all-day, everyday kindergarten is that children's minds will fully develop by improving their ability to reason, to communicate, and to increase their general knowledge. If they are tired, this will not happen. The prime time for learning is first thing in the morning. This should not be compromised. Bus sickness. If children are prone to bus sickness and they get on the bus for that period of time, they're really going to be sick. It's going to be a problem for the bus driver, a problem for the teachers, and the children are going to come in distraught. Toileting issues. That's a long time to be on the bus. Young children have very small bladders. Even with the toilet in my classroom, many times they didn't make it. Okay. Falling asleep on the bus, going home at night, children are going to be very tired and will probably fall asleep on the bus. I know, I've got young grandchildren. If that happens, they're not going to want to do anything the parents want them to do. They're not going to want to go to sleep at night. Hence, they're going to be tired the next morning, tired for the teachers. It goes on and on. Children should not be sitting on the bus for long periods of time. They need to be active. Pride in Millgrove is extremely high, evidenced by all those here tonight. I do realize that you're looking for the most cost-effective way to deal with our schools, but please think about what is best for the children of Millgrove. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next we have Jay Ballman. You have the floor when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to begin by expressing my appreciation to each and every one of you for the time and effort that you put into this process and holding the forum here for us this evening. My name is John Ballman, and I live in Strabane. I'm also a member of the Millgrove community. As many of our other speakers this evening have expressed, our common threads seem to align, and I too am a concerned parent wanting the best possible learning environment and surrounding circumstances for my child. I'd like to utilize my time here simply to pose some questions that have been weighing on my mind and the mind of many members of Millgrove that I've interacted with, and I would hope that many of these have crossed yours, our panel of decision makers. Though there's an abundance of information available, and we can all agree on the Hamilton District's website, I found that it's not transparent where funding is coming from, how it's being allocated, and since my learning of the ARC process right around 2 months ago, was around the time of the last public meeting, admittedly I've learned a lot of things. And one of the things that I hadn't really considered until having those conversations and hearing it here tonight was, thank you, is the human costs. We've heard it several times over, transportation related and otherwise. And let's take a moment to consider those. What are the human costs to our children from long commutes on buses? We've heard some of the consequences, some of them we suffer from as well. And in a study that was just released this morning by the University of Waterloo for the Ontario Trillium Federation, it stated that the average person's commute in Ontario has increased to 47 minutes and that it impacts our quality of life. So consider we're hearing kids 3 to 10 years old experiencing significantly higher ride times than that, excuse me, well in excess of the provincial average of up to 70, 75 minutes. Or alternatively, let's consider the human cost of managing a young student's stress and having to cope with the significant change that comes with disrupting their daily routine. Well, we can easily forecast the hard costs associated with tangibles such as these. In the April 14th Standing Committee Trustees Question and Answer document, for example, slide 11 lays out a costing model where reducing commute times was addressed. And using the 50-minute commute option, which is still in excess of the average Ontarian's commute, I'll point out that it would also mean an additional expenditure of over $120,000 a year for 3 buses. To state the obvious, by not closing Millgrove, bus needs would remain status quo, and using the 10-year projection model that was released in the ARC options that were presented, you would realize a savings of $1.2 million. Also found in the ARC recommendations document, specifically the lines on projected savings chart, there seem to be some additional questions to consider. I've reviewed the data available and cannot find any estimates for ongoing carrying costs of the locations that are identified for closure. Furthermore, in these economic times, is it realistic to expect that the proceeds from the sales of the impacted properties will be realized in the short term? In looking at option 2A, I question the reality of there being a 0% carrying cost over a 10-year period, and fear that this is a potential oversight that needs both your attention and consideration. I must say I also saw no reference to the cost of the necessary environmental studies, site preparation, or demolition costs associated with the options that were presented. Though the options put forth include the construction costs of full-day kindergarten spaces, the other soft costs in creating those spaces, whether it be height-appropriate countertops, bathroom facilities, or such, also need to be considered. And again, may I suggest that there are options available where costs have either already been realized or been budgeted for. One last point, let's consider the costs associated with providing our students with seamless care options. Pitfalls to a board-operated facility were pointed out eloquently earlier, and are all but eliminated by allowing a solution that recognizes the service Millgrove Children's Center provides to us, to the Millgrove community, with no additional investment required by the board. By simply opting for a solution allowing Millgrove School to remain open, another notable cash flow savings in excess of $250,000 is there for you to realize. In closing, with the potential human cost to our students and the significant savings that can be had, I encourage you to find a solution that is both fiscally responsible and, more importantly, addresses the unique needs of the West Flamborough area student base. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, before we take a short break, number 18, Lionel T. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. First, I forgot my glasses. But fortunately, I have large font.
There's even larger font right here.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. All right, but it's looking backwards, and unfortunately, unlike my wife, Wendy, I don't have eyes in the back of my head. My name is Lionel T. I'm a proud member of the Millgrove community, where I moved from deepest, darkest Toronto in 1995 to raise our family in a country setting. A place where I was more than a number, and yes, like that famous bar in Boston, everyone knew my name. When word of the recommendation of the ARC process filtered down, I was determined to do what I could to assist in keeping Millgrove open. As a data and analytics specialist, I was prepared to perform all levels of analysis and review. Armed with a trusty internet connection, an Excel spreadsheet, and even an industrial-strength statistical analysis tool that could tell me the standard deviation for 1 billion observations in a nanosecond, I was bound and determined to convert numbers into their binary basics, insert them into a nice glossy spreadsheet, and wow the audience with charts, graphs, tables, and lots of numbers in varying degrees of red and black. I was ready to make more predictions than Matt Hayes does on his weather reports. However, it's been a long day, and this is not really a time for presenting more numbers. What I would like to do is simply point out some of what I believe to be true costs or savings that appear to have been excluded from the current review. Building a new school is not just about bricks and mortar, but also about fitting out those rooms. Full-day kindergarten rooms, in particular, require extra funds to complete. Has this cost been considered? Transportation has been covered in detail. The cost of any extra buses should be taken into account, as even one extra bus can create a large additional burden on board budgets. And two would be twice as costly, and I didn't need my powerful stat tool to tell me that, running up to $84,000 per year, or $840,000 over a 10-year period. Has this cost been considered? In my review of the budgeting and forecasting process of the ARC, I also noted that no consideration was made for site preparation, which, as my neighbor John pointed out, includes such items as site studies, environmental assessments, and even lengthy and costly water supply requirements mandated by the Ministry of Environment. Has this cost been considered? It has been noted that the presence of a seamless care option to the community is deemed to be worth $270,000. Keeping Millgrove open would allow these funds to be saved, as no replacement would be required. Again, has this opportunity been considered? All of these could easily be seen to exceed $1 million, which is, of course, the number showing up there, over the board's 10-year planning time frame. I found it interesting that the option number that sees Millgrove staying open is 2B. As it reminds me of something even older than Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto, but rather of William Shakespeare's soliloquy in Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. However, in this case, I would prefer to say that 2B is the answer. Keep Millgrove open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lionel. So at this point, we are going to take a quick 5-minute break. Trustees also have small letters, so we will be back and we will reconvene as soon as we can. See you shortly.
Hiding a little bit. How are you sitting? Yeah. Oh, I've never been in here before. You guys know. know where your spots are.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I think I'll see if I
don't have too many more meetings. I wish you guys don't have too many more meetings.
No, that's good. The other thing, the new headquarters is looking okay, but I don't like the look of it now.
Yeah.
It looks like 3 boxes.
Yeah.
Because that's, I see the politicians over there.
Yeah.
I think we all go switch as a question.
What's that?
I think we can go on. Good things too. proper, well thought out, prepared, good Millgrove people are. That's what I'm hearing. And I know it's just going to get better. Guys, what are you going to change it coming up today? You know? I would miss it. Miss the second.
Do I need to whistle?
I'm not
not talking about it. I talked to Karen about it earlier. She's aware of it. That's all. It's okay. When we were in the church 6 weeks ago, and I we did it. This is, it just doesn't get any. So now it's just about our message.
With our agenda, we are on item 19 for a 10-minute delegation. We're going to continue with our Vanderboom at the mic. Perfect. Welcome to the meeting, and when you are ready, you have the floor. Thank you.
My name is Rosalind Vanderboom, and I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 at Millgrove, 1 at Spencer. It is my understanding that the board must follow a multi-year strategic plan. I'm referring to the long-term facility master plan, which directs both accommodation decisions and budget priorities, hereafter referred to as the plan. In the plan, 14 elementary areas identified with schools linked as families based on geography, utilization, and most importantly, they are linked to a secondary school destination. Millgrove is located in the East Flamborough planning area and was not designated for an ARC review. According to the Ministry of Education, schools at risk of closure should be identified in a long-term plan. Even with the yearly review of this document presented by Dr. Malloy on March 3, 2014, Millgrove remains part of East Flamborough. So a lot of parents are left wondering, how can you justify closing Millgrove on the basis of a West Flamborough ARC review without examining our unique relationship with East Flamborough? In 2013, Millgrove School went through a boundary review, and I quote from the Standing Committee report, "The Millgrove community has more of an affiliation with Waterdown than it does Dundas. Geographic proximity to Waterdown lends itself to this affiliation. The consultation process supported the Millgrove community's desire to attend Waterdown High School, but there was less conclusive evidence to support changing their existing middle school assignment." End of quote. The only Waterdown Middle School option provided resulted in splitting the grade 5 class in half and sending them to 2 different feeder schools. The option to attend as a full class wasn't available. It was not an acceptable transition for our children to be split. As a result, parents selected Spencer, a rural school that could support our children staying together. 11 years of our schooling occurs in East Flamborough and 3 years in West Flamborough. Though we are linked to Spencer, Millgrove is unique and separate to Greensville. We are part of the East and the West school system. This unique role is historic. What's supposed to be up here is the brick that's on our school that lists East and West Union. Okay? At the April 7th Standing Committee, Dr. Malloy indicated that community linkages between schools are honored in ARC decisions. This has significance in the case of Millgrove. Selecting option 2A results in Millgrove students attending school for 10 years in Greensville, which is linked to Dundas High School, and ignores our link to Waterdown and our secondary school destination. Including Millgrove in the West Flamborough ARC was incongruent with the plan and the Pupil Accommodation Review Process Policy Directive, which has led to some of the challenges faced in achieving an equitable solution in this ARC. I would also like to address some of the misunderstandings that I've heard about Millgrove School during this ARC process. The Millgrove School building is not in poor condition. Of the 5 schools reviewed in the West Flamborough ARC, it has the lowest FCI rating at 25% and in 10 years is projected to be at 32%. Greensville's building is listed in poor condition, having a current FCI of 132%, which increases to 162% in 10 years. Millgrove has no identified capital needs that put it at risk of closure or relate to health and safety concerns.
Minimal capital has been spent on Millgrove School to maintain its current condition. Our current urgent and high renewal needs are less than those at Mount Hope, a rural school the director currently supports staying open. Millgrove continues to be a school of choice for many parents. The current utilization rate is 81%, and the projections for 2018 are 79%. It's not one of the 17 schools in Hamilton with a utilization rate of less than 67% associated with decreased funding. The future projections for 2022 show our utilization rate remaining above this critical number. As per Robert Fex, Millgrove qualifies for provincial top-up funding to 100%. With Millgrove remaining open, the combined utilization rates for West Flamborough are 96% in 2016 and 88% in 2022. Based on the community need, the staff have supported schools remaining open with utilization rates of less than 70% and school sizes of less than 400 in the East Hamilton and Central Mountain Arc. Millgrove is asking for the same consideration to stay open as a smaller, exceptional school in a large geographical, rural setting. The Millgrove catchment has gone through multiple school closures, with Brockview and Beech Grove consolidated into our school in 1988, and Millgrove is the only school for our expansive area. During the ARC, Millgrove, an area of 22 kilometers, was represented by 4 votes on the ARC committee. Greensville, an area of 10 kilometers approximately, represented by 2 local schools, had a total of 9 votes. As a result, the voice of the communities of Millgrove was disempowered. Looking back now, we ask the board to recognize that equal representation from each feeder school, 2 votes, is required when a joint middle school is included in an ARC. The Millgrove communities participated fully in the ARC process. Millgrove sincerely wanted a win-win solution to meet the distinct needs of all communities. Millgrove never opposed Greensville's wish for a new school. We are against compromising our youngest children to create a new school of 525 students in our rural setting. We believed our voices were being heard during the ARC process. At the December 11th working meeting, the ARC committee recorded a vote that Millgrove should remain open. At the 2 final public meetings, over 50% of the attendees were from Millgrove. We clearly stated our opposition to closure and our support for option 2B. At the final public meeting, both options were presented with equal standing by the ARC committee. The prioritization of option 2A over B was never presented for public feedback. At the final working meeting, there was a decision to place preference on option 2A. This decision didn't reflect public feedback. Our petition, which is in your package, was signed by over 1,200 people and shows that 100% of the current Millgrove school population is against closing and building a new 525 student-sized school. We have learned a lot. In a future ARC process, we suggest driving the boundaries of the catchment becomes a requirement. In doing so, we believe that ARC members would understand the impact of relocating the youngest students. In meetings, it was clear there was no familiarity with the northernmost boundaries of the Millgrove catchment area, where Highway 6 North becomes 2 lanes as it enters Puslinch. The ministry has encouraged the development of community partnerships. Provincial partnerships like reviewing Millgrove's relationship with the Early Years program or exploring a relationship with the Hamilton Public Library would be beneficial. The ARC process should reflect the unique partnerships of the school. The Millgrove location is uniquely placed to serve both the needs of the East and West Flamborough schools. Due to the fixed mapping process used in the ARC, the value of Millgrove to East Flamborough could not be examined in a West ARC. As a result, the value of the Millgrove site to the board has been grossly understated. Rapid pocket growth is occurring in Waterdown, where there are only 138 elementary spaces available in permanent accommodation across all grades of the 5 school sites. The new school in southeast Waterdown will not be ready until approximately 2017. Millgrove has the ability to relieve accommodation pressures. If you are looking for the opportunity to give us over 100% utilization, you could examine our relationship with the K-5 population at Flamborough Centre. With future reviews of the long-term plan, please reflect the diverse needs of the primary and junior students in the rural setting. Smaller school sizes might be required. To achieve a school with 500 to 600 students, a huge catchment area is needed. Large catchments have many negative impacts, so what are we willing to sacrifice to obtain this size of school? With the implementation of FDK, the board needs to evaluate the impact of the 60-minute transportation guideline. Although transportation was a guiding principle in this ARC, the committee's recommended 45-minute transportation time was not reflected in the solutions and nor the costing. We believe the board can support our K-5 school model for our youngest children's success. For middle school, we support our children joining with a larger middle school population, similar to the model used at G.R. Allen and Dalewood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Roslyn. Next, we have Dee Colette. Welcome, and when you're ready, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Dean Collette, and I've been a resident of Millgrove for 17 years now. I bought my house as a single young guy, but even back then I was thinking about the future. I knew that one day I'd want to raise a family in a rural environment. I myself grew up in a suburb, and while I had a great childhood, I always longed to be able to live in a more rural setting and to have a little piece of property. And so back when I was looking for homes, I came across Millgrove, and when I found my home, I fell in love with it. It backs onto a farm, it's in the green belt, but I was concerned, and I'd said to my real estate, it's too bad, I'd love to move here, but I'm concerned about schooling. And so we took a walk out the front door, and she says, oh, I'm going to take you to the school. So I went to get into her car. Well, she kept walking. Where's she going? So I followed her. We walked down Cumminsville Drive through a little walk path, and there was this beautiful little country school. And that day, I made an offer on my house 17 years ago, even though I didn't even have a girlfriend at the time. And 15 months ago, my beautiful wife is sitting up there with her sister. 15 months ago, we were blessed to be able to welcome Sierra into our lives, and she's the reason that I'm here today. I can tell you that my wife and I are planning on having more children. I did try to negotiate with her for 25 more children to make sure that the catchment size was big enough to keep more people alive. I'll get back to you on that, but so far the negotiations have hit a bit of a stalemate. I had prepared a speech that had all kinds of the issues in it, but I can tell you that the group of parents that I've been working with, I came into this late. I happen myself to be in school right now. I'm a mature student. I'm attending law school, and I didn't realize that there was even an ARC process going on until 6 weeks ago. I got a text from my wife saying they're closing our school. And I didn't even know who to call. So I reached out to the parents in the community and found out about a little meeting they were having at a church in Freelton. So my wife packed into the car, and we raced up to Freelton that night, and we walked into a very somber meeting. There was probably about 30 parents there, and I can tell you that it was the longest faces I've seen, and people were worried like we were worried. So we talked that night, and we were very fortunate to have counselors Partridge and Pasuta there, and they gave us some very sage advice. But it was from that moment on that I realized that I was joining a group that was already very tight-knit, very organized, and very determined. Unfortunately for me, because of law school and because of exams, I wasn't able to do a lot over the last 6 weeks, but I promised them that I would be here tonight to speak, and I also promised them that I would do all I could to help in our endeavor. What I've learned over those last 6 weeks is, well, two things. I first want to talk about things from a Millgrove perspective, just because as a Millgrove resident, I'm not quite sure if it's possible even to get you guys to understand what our school means to our little community. Millgrove is not just the place if you sneeze, you'll miss it on your way by it. It's so much more than that. I see in the audience tonight Dr. Longridge. That's my vet. I'll tell you a small little story, if you'll permit me. A couple of years ago, my dog was in the prime of her life, and she contracted cancer. And we struggled very, very hard, my wife and I. We did everything we could for 2 months. Dr. Longridge helped us. He sent us to different vets to get different operations, chemotherapy. But unfortunately, luck wasn't on her side. And he saw how much we loved our dog. And like a country vet would do, he didn't ask us to bring our dog into a dark, cold room that he knew she was afraid of. He came to our home. He came to our home, and he helped my wife and I through the most difficult time we'd ever been through. That's rural living. So now I look at my daughter, and I see a future for her, and the future for her is here. This is her future. These are the people that are going to be the village that raises a child. No offense to the people in Greensville, we hope that she's there with you for grades 6, 7, and 8, but you're not going to raise my daughter from kindergarten to grade 5, because I can promise you I'm not putting her on a bus. I'm not. For 17 years, I've done that walk to that school, sometimes with my dog, sometimes when I'm running and trying to get in shape, sometimes just to think. And when I go to that school, for 17 years I dreamed of bringing my daughter there and taking her to that school. If that school is taken away from me, I will be leaving that community. I will probably find somewhere in Burlington that I can try and recreate the same thing that I've been able to have in Millgrove. But if you're doing numbers for the future, take my daughter out of it, because she won't be part of those numbers. And I can tell you that there are other parents in this room that I've had the same conversation with that feel just as passionately as I do. If we can go to the next slide. I don't know how many people were listening to the radio today or watch TV, but the University of Waterloo study came out today. And you see the headline, it's longer commutes reduce quality of life. So I am in a unique position because I go to law school, and I also have to do a commute. I go to Osgoode, which is in North York. It's an hour's drive each way every day. And I remember when I sat down with my wife and we talked about what we were what was life going to be like for me as a student. And I often have people come and say, how is it? What's it like? You haven't been in school for so long, law school. It must be so tough. Do you want to know what the toughest thing is? That hour commute. It kicks my butt every day. Every day I have to get up, rush out the door, charge for an hour to get to school. When I get to school, it takes me a half an hour before I can even understand what it is the professors are saying, because I'm so frazzled from that hour commute. Then when I get in my car, I have all these things, to-do lists. When I get home, I'm going to spend this much time with the baby, this much time we're going to have dinner, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to go do my homework. I built myself a nice little office. I'm going to go in my office every day at 7:30. My daughter's in bed. I've done dinner, and it's the commute. I get killed from that commute. So I would often go sit at my desk and I'd actually doze off. So I would spend my weekends trying to catch up for the lost productivity during the week. We have a premier in Ontario right now that has identified the largest budgetary expenditure that is in our generation's future is gridlock. She says it's going to take $50 billion to fix it for two reasons. Two reasons that we have to do it. One, productivity. We're getting killed by productivity because of people's long commutes. And two, quality of life. In this study, they identified the longest commute in the province of Ontario. It's in Toronto. Anybody want to guess what that average commute time is? It's 64 minutes. Yet here we are with a proposal in 2A where we're expecting our parents from Freelton to put their kids on a bus, even if it's not 75 minutes, because I know you have a 60-minute cutoff, even if you're able to fix that and get it to 50 minutes. Right now, they have kids that are going 25 minutes. You're asking for an extra half hour, plus, don't forget, kids don't just show up. If the bus is 7:30, they don't show up at 7:29. They're told to show up 15 minutes ahead of time, so they're there 7:15. A lot of those kids, when they get to school, they're getting to school just as the bell is ringing. Not the first bell, the last bell. So they're running into class. The same way I often ran into class because I was stuck on my commute. And I can tell you, when I'm undoing my jacket and I'm sitting down, I'm not focused for 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I'm a fully grown adult. How are we expecting our 4-year-olds, our 5-year-olds, our 7-year-olds to be able to do what I can't do? And I'm 26. Ish. Anyway, I said I'd be brief. It seems I wasn't that brief, but the person following me now, Ev, has more great stuff. I'm so proud of all of you here. I can say that without a doubt, if you as the board do the right thing, I know my daughter's going to be in really good hands. So in closing, I'd like to say that we are all asking you, you know what, no, we're not asking you, we're begging you. Keep our school open and take care of our kids the way that we know they need to be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Next at the podium, we have Eve Post for attending the delegation. Welcome.
Thank you. So, my name is Eve Post, and like Dean, I was very, very frustrated when 2A came out and the staff supported that option. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't see how it could be justified based on your long-term facility plan. Because I've looked at it extensively and it didn't make any sense to me. So honestly, at that point, I lost faith in the board and even what would happen if we did try to talk to you. That's where I was at. So I focused really hard on trying to understand what your policies were and trying to understand how you made decisions. And I'm really glad I did, because it allowed me to come to the conclusion that we're not understanding each other because we're both missing a very important piece of information. So from my side, I now accept that the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board is an urban board. You have 86% urban schools, so you do need urban policies. I get that. I didn't actually realize just how urban you were. But that wasn't really the end of it. Once I looked at your inner city Hamilton issues, I'm embarrassed to say, I was actually shocked. I didn't really have a good idea what you need to deal with and how you need to spread your money around. So I now can say that I think I understand where you're coming from, and it does make sense that you have to have policies that are urban driven. You have to have policies because you are mostly an urban board and you need to provide for all your students, but you also need to protect your most vulnerable. And from what I can gather, a lot of those are high needs kids in inner city. So I now think that I understand. So what I think is the flip side, basically to that aha moment for me, is that we have only 14% rural schools in your board. And then I realized Flamborough actually is about 60% of those schools. And if we take out just East Flamborough and concentrate on West Flamborough that we're talking about tonight, then we're close to 50%. We're almost half your rural schools. So that makes what we have to say quite important, and it made me realize we probably haven't explained it well enough to you. If I had no clue about inner city, I'm pretty sure that you don't, I wouldn't say you have no clue, but sorry. We assumed you knew what we meant when we kept saying rural, rural. But from your perspective, the province doesn't really consider us rural. We're not really rural for funding. We understand that. We're not remote rural, but we are rural. Okay, so we're not asking for things that remote rural schools need, because we realize we don't need that funding for those what it's supposed to be for. We also realize that you have things that urban schools need, and I can see from your budget prioritization that a lot of that is dealing with your urban schools. So when I looked at that, I thought, it's great. We're good. You know, everybody needs energy updates, but Millgrove is good. That should work in our favor. But it actually puts us a little bit in a loophole, because we kind of fall through the cracks. So tonight, what I really want to make sure that we understand is for us to do a much better job of explaining several things. Who we are. I'm going to read because I don't want to miss these points. What our diverse needs are, and the fact that our rural populations actually do have distinct clusters, similar to, I assume, your inner city schools do as well. You wouldn't assume they all need the same things. And within those clusters, there's probably different needs. And more importantly, how our rural urban adjacent model works, and very specifically how our success is tied to specific conditions that we have to maintain, or we can't transfer that success. So I think if we can explain the how much better, which we just assumed we did, and clearly I don't think we did, then I hope that by the end of tonight you can understand the why. Why Millgrove's rural-urban adjacent model works, and why our success doesn't translate into a linear urban model. We keep saying it, but there are actually reasons why. So what I think is the missing piece of information for you is knowing our community and knowing our parents. And I've read your website a lot, and I know that you want to do that. I know that that's a priority. So tonight you get to know us. You've had 2 hours to get to know us. So I hope you like us. I'm just going to summarize. So basically we want to know who we are. So why did we choose rural adjacent to urban? It was a choice. We're not just outside of a city because we happen to live there. We actually chose rural adjacent to urban for reasons. So we, in ourselves, we're a diverse population. There are many parents here who are rural born, rural raised. My son is friends with a 4th generation Millgrove farming family. There are people also who are urban people who have specifically moved to the Millgrove catchment area, which could be 3 communities. They've chosen to move there because they want rural, urban adjacent. And if you just want an example of a diverse population, you can just take me. I'm one person. And you may not like this, but my dad is a bona fide cowboy. He's here. I don't think you get cowboys walking into City Hall very much. My parents met at a rodeo, okay? I was in charge of 50 head of cattle, at least I thought I was, when I was 12, okay? You're probably not going to get more urban, or rural minded than me. But in the same time, in the same person, I work in an international format. I depend on online connections, 21st century, living and learning. We have complex medical needs in our family. We depend on 21st century skills and tools and everything that comes with that. We depend on that. We have very, very unique academic considerations in our family. So we really do depend on 21st century learning. So for me, I don't think 21st century and heritage or rural are mutually exclusive. I think they actually go together really, really well, and I'm very glad they do. So that's who we are. We did not choose urban, we did not choose rural remote, we chose rural adjacent to urban, and we did it on purpose. Flamborough, we need to just discuss a little bit about West Flamborough, because I can make it very easy for you and tell you about almost 50% of your schools right now, where your clusters are. In West Flamborough, you have Beverly, Central, and Dr. Seton. That was very clear in the ARC. They have similar diverse needs and values. They came up with a great solution. They worked together really well. They were very happy with it. I did not understand their need to close 2 schools and make a new one, but I do now, and I respect that they are the experts in what they need, and I really think that they worked really hard, and that should be facilitated as much as possible. Greensville and Spencer Valley, they're clearly a cluster, just from geography alone, but it became very clear that they have different needs and desires than Millgrove does. The things that they really wanted weren't things that we wanted. So we can't be included in that cluster just for that reason alone. So they're a cluster, Greensville and Spencer Valley. Millgrove, we're a cluster. We're a cluster of 1 school. So that may sound weird, it may sound like we think we're special and we need to be held to a different standard than everyone else, but it's not for those reasons. It's not for nostalgia, it's not for emotion. We have a lot of emotion attached to our school, but those are not the reasons that we think we're distinct. So again, I'm going to read because I don't want to miss what I've written down. So we need to know why Millgrove is distinct. And these aren't arguments that other schools have used. They're based on fact and they're specific to us. We have a very large, narrow, skinny catchment. It's very awkward.
1 minute.
Yeah. So we have a very large skinny catchment. It basically means that we have a lot of considerations, and you've heard a lot about transportation tonight. I think we've made that point. We have 3 communities, not one. We've made that point. We have an ideal location between West Flamborough and East Flamborough. We actually think it's an asset. We think we add value to those 2 communities, and we think we can add value to them from us. We have high childcare needs, very high childcare needs compared to other catchments, and we have a great solution. And you've heard a lot about how much we value that, and we really needed to put a number to it because it just was getting discounted. And we're very proud of the fact that we can allow you, especially once I learned about the inner city needs, you can use that money elsewhere. Please do. You know, please don't you don't have to spend money with Millgrove in a lot of areas. We have a historic building that's a green asset. You do have some of this information I'm going to give you in a handout. So I'm going to finish quickly by the important points of how rural adjacent model succeeds. And it depends on right-sizing our school. And that is important because large parent and community engagement, it impacts student achievement, you know that. Teacher engagement, right-sizing is important. Strategic location within our catchment, and recognition of the impact of geography, road paths, and transportation. We don't need you to recognize what you do within our city, but we do need you to recognize that. And remember, we're not guessing. We have over 100 engaged volunteers in our school. We know our strategic direction aligns with yours. And if I can just finish for 30 seconds, what we hope is that we provide an aha moment for you, as I had for your problems. Our visions align, but we can't follow everything in your urban policy. And the 500 pupil school is what doesn't fit with how our rural urban adjacent model succeeds. We know that. We looked at it. We didn't just say that. We looked at it. We do not feel that 100%. So we believe Millgrove belongs in the long-term facility master plan, and I'm going to just give you a handout that outlines why I think that, because obviously I couldn't say that in 10 minutes. And please value what we both value most in your decision making, and that's our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next we have S. Argyle. I pronounced that correctly.
Ardell.
Oh, I tried hard. I consulted 2 people. Oh, did you? Sorry, my correction. Jessica won this one. I again. You may proceed.
That's terrific. I always blame my husband that his family didn't really actually pay attention to their grandparents and how to pronounce their name, but I'll forgive him for that. Shackleton was always much easier. First off, thank you, Dr. Malloy, trustees, for your attention tonight. You all have done very well to sit through all of these presentations. I'd also like to thank counselors for coming out tonight and sticking with us, and the MPP for showing up. It's been great to see all of this support. And one thing I can say is it's fantastic to feel part of this Millgrove community. My name is Sarah Ardell. I am a member of the school parent council, and I was also a member of the ARC. So I had the luxury of sitting through all those long 3-hour-plus meetings. But you know what? It's quite easy to do when you've got this community standing behind you and one united voice coming out. At those 5 meetings, we represented 3 communities. And I know we keep hammering on this, but I live in Freelton. I am one of those concessions that are way up at the top. So I want everyone to appreciate what it's like to live up north of our boundary and what it's like, because some of you don't get it that way very often. At the last meeting for the ARC, we had some strong delegates stand up from our school, speak very well about what we wanted, and we thought the voice was being well heard from our ARC members. One of the members outside West Flamborough, in fact, said, you know what, there's only been a couple people that spoke tonight from Millgrove. Where's all the representation? That's when 60% of the attendees stood up. We didn't want you guys to miss what our communities felt tonight. That's why we've worn the t-shirts and we've come out as a full community. We want you to hear the voice, and we want you to understand we want Millgrove to stay open. So, as I said, I live in Freelton, but I also commute to Waterloo and Toronto. I do the 1 hour commute every day. And I can test from my husband, I hate it, okay? I don't want to put my child on a bus for even 30 minutes. That's why we take our children and we drive them to Millgrove Children's Center every day. And thankfully, we have seamless care. We both hold senior management positions in companies, and we can't afford to say, oh, I was late for work because a bus was late, there's snow on the road. Thankfully, the Teeds are always open, and that is without a lie. When the board closes for snow days, the Teeds remain open. That means I can take my children to a safe environment that's secured with loving and licensed daycare providers, and they're always there to take care of my children. And I'm very thankful to you guys for doing that for us. I grew up in a small town. My dad used to say it's population of 60 when everyone is home. I did that from 0 to 10. I appreciate the small community because I have lifelong friendships from it. But what is more important, I was then plucked out of that community and stuck in the city of Burlington in a school of 600. I appreciate that environment. I appreciate what it means to happen from 60 kids that I knew well in my classrooms to all of a sudden 600. If it wasn't for knowing those lifelong relationships, having teachers that cared, that followed up with me to say, you know what, how's it going in Burlington? They're outside of London. Why would they care? But you know what? They're like our teachers that are at Millgrove. They're all here tonight because they actually care about our children. Not only what happens to them on a day-to-day basis, but they care what happens to them when they're at the arena. They'll stay around to watch those hockey games, and it is truly a community that we have out in our area. So I don't need to repeat, I hope, all the things that the delegates have gone through tonight. We've explained that we hold the highest EQAO scores in the board. We have the teachers that care. We have seamless care that doesn't cost the board any money, that is provided privately, and is always there for us. We have a unique model, something that, you know what, the Ontario government is actually looking at, because they appreciate that the private care model working with the public system can work. So please consider tonight everything that the delegates have shared with you, from the fiscal savings that Lionel will happily walk you through those spreadsheets. And I'm a spreadsheet girl, but Lionel really is a spreadsheet guy, and will happily walk you through those numbers to help you show what the savings can be. Adding buses will not help us. Adding buses still means we've got 28 stops to make. You guys probably don't take 28 stoplights to get to work. So please reconsider the closure of Millgrove. I think we've stated well enough and often enough all the uniqueness that we have in Millgrove. That's all I have to share tonight. So thank you, and thank you for the community.
Yep. Good evening. My name is Nick Lowers, and I've actually registered to run for school board trustee in Ward 15 in the next municipal election. I would like to be... Thank you, I'll take that. I would like to begin by thanking the Millgrove community and councillors Partridge, Pasuta, and McHattie for bringing their voice to this forum. And thank you very much as well, trustees. As many have spoken before me tonight, I will endeavor to get straight to the point. I'm here to advocate the position that Millgrove should stay open. I said, somebody here say it's not bedtime yet. As we've heard this evening, there are many reasons to keep Millgrove open. Millgrove provides an excellent learning environment for children and has consistently high EQAO scores exceeding board expectations. Millgrove building is in good condition and has 81% usage, and it also has the lowest 1 to 5 year renewal costs of 7 rural schools. Millgrove has a rural and distinct identity. Urban formulas do not work well for rural schools, nor is it fair to lump all rural schools into the same category. Each is distinct and different and brings something unique to the table. One trustee admitted this on April 7th, calling out the fact that rural schools do not fit the one-size-fits-all LTFMP guiding principles. With the impact of long bus rides on young children and options that entail not closing Millgrove and keeping it open, closing Millgrove would be injudicious. Millgrove is a precious school that once gone cannot be recreated. Trustees, as those who have been entrusted to make important decisions on behalf of the public, I ask you to show us that the board recognizes the creativity, the diversity, the excellence, and the citizenship that rural and local schools bring to our culture. Please do the right thing in June and vote to keep Millgrove Public School open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Next we have our Zura. Do we have that person in attendance? I got the president once. Yeah, it's spelled S-Z-U-R-A-L-A. There we go, I just mispronounced it, that's the problem. Because I spelled it. Perfect, thank you very much for joining us. And you have the floor when you are ready.
Okay. My name is Ron Sorella. I live in this community for so many years, like in Hamilton. I wrote a letter on Good Friday, which I was down with Brother Ken at from Parkview Church. He has his own landscaping business, so we were down there, and I wrote this letter. It says, "My name is Ronald Sorella. I was talking to a lady named Wendy. They said that some of the school board was going to close the school down, and I thought to myself, that's not a good thing. The children of the committee have a right to be there, live there, work there, play there, whatever. I also wrote down for the speaker or person itself to speak for the for the town. I just want myself, hopefully, that this message or this meeting will come to have a plan to keep this school open. I really think that it's a good thing. I said to myself, I hope to pray that they will keep it open, and it says, Millgrove School, I hope they'll keep it open, and I put my name, yours truly, Ronald Sorella. I think I saw this committee. I was there with Brother Ken for about 2 days. We went there on the 16th and the 19th. We done some work down for Wendy and Lionel, and I thought it was a nice town. I met a lot of people there. People were just great. We worked there, Brother Ken and me. We were doing some work, and hopefully, if we ever get another job in that town, me and Brother Ken, which is Ken Barr, we will go down and just do the work. If they need us, we will be there to help that community. So I just want to say, please do not close the school down. As I say to the, what do you call the school board, yeah, the school board. I want to tell the school board not to close it down. I've heard from a friend of mine, Pastor John's friend, John, his name was, he said they're closing about 12, 13 schools in Hamilton. And I was wondering, this school, like the public school with the kids, I said, that's kind of brutal because I don't like to see people throwing money away or closing school down, because you may need schools for the next generation of children. So I hope to pray that this will be open. And still have to say, I have nothing else to say there. Thank you very much, Will.
for staying so late.
Yeah.
So my name is Ian, this is my wife Allison. As it so happens, 12 days ago we moved about 12 houses down from Greensville Elementary. And so when we learned of this news, we did our best to leave work early and get down here. Reading through the slides, we did as much as we could to catch up on the past meetings that have taken place. I noticed, and I couldn't help but noticing, that there's a 13% projected decline in enrollment in this area in the next 9 years. It came as a surprise to both of us. My wife and I moved here from Toronto, actually, so I'm sure that takes us off people's good list. But
we live here now.
Yeah. We too, like a few people before us to speak, we wanted to raise more of a rural family. But I just can't help but notice this 13% projected decline. And you know, as a taxpayer now, I can't help but think that to close schools in light of these numbers as given seems slightly irresponsible. I don't have a better word for that, but just noticing Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington, Waterdown, the western expansion of the GTA, you know, the wagons are coming out west.
We're just a start.
Yeah, we're just a start to get this far, but essentially where we're living near Greensville is one of the last affordable places west end Toronto that's a reasonable commute to downtown. So I'll be taking Aldershot and I get downtown in about an hour and 10 minutes, which isn't too bad actually, but
that's not okay for kids on buses.
no. We're not here to talk about buses because we're so close to the schools in question. But I just wanted to touch upon, 13% decline, is that really reasonable seeing what's happened in Waterdown? And again, just as we move out this way, do we really think it's gonna stop at Highway 6? Metrolinx is coming out with an expansion out this way, and I don't know if that's been considered in new development. And I don't know a polite way to say this, but an aging population versus an aged population, we're the people moving in, and we expect to have children, knock on wood, in the next few years. And then, case in point perhaps, I noticed that there's some revenue coming in excess of $1 million for disposal revenue of the properties. And I'm willing to bet that those will go to developers at some point. I know that that's the second round of bidding. I read that in one of the slides, but again, case in point, I'm guessing that's going to be sold off as homes at some point. What we ultimately wanted to say, we've come from Toronto. We went to school together. We went from K to 5, and then we had a middle school, then we had a high school. We've seen, my wife is a teacher. She's seen,
There's a huge difference between the kids in a K to 5 and then a grade 6 to 8. And we understand now that it's likely not going to happen, that Greensville is going to stay open, and perhaps that has been the choice all along for Greensville.
There's no t-shirts either.
There's no t-shirts. We're a little surprised. I sported green. But really, to us, if that is going to be the case, there should be some separation between the Ks, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s even, between them and the 6, 7, 8s.
Yeah.
I've worked in a number of different schools, and I can tell you firsthand the things that happen in the 6 to 8 schools in downtown Toronto and in Mississauga. That's not something I would ever want my kindergarten children knowing, or my grade 1, 2, 3 children knowing.
Yeah. We're not here to talk about society, but there's a prevalence of younger people being exposed to older subject matter. And by having, JK, SK, looking up to the grade 8s, that's a whole other age group. SEX has got into that age group, and I wouldn't really want kindergartens to be looking up to the highest age groups in that school.
And thinking that they're cool and that they should be emulated.
Yeah, so if we're going to step forward with a K to 8, I would really hope that there is somewhat of a glass wall there. And I don't know if that's possible. We were so happy to be so close to what looked like a terrific school from the outside. The underrepresentation from Greensville here, I'm thinking, is because both A and B are chopping blocks for Greensville, so what's the point of coming out? We're late to the party, and we just want to say that we're not the happiest with A and B. And to be frank, not being Catholic, I can see having to save up for private school, which is unfortunate.
Especially because there are going to be more people coming in and moving into the area. Why would you get rid of a school that will 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road be needed?
That's all.
Thank you very much, Ian and Allison. We appreciate that. So this ends the portion of item 2, our delegations for the evening. On behalf of trustees, and I think I speak for the entire board, we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I think it's clear that we've learned quite a bit. And we've done a number of delegations for arts in the past, and I can tell you that this one tonight has actually been quite enjoyable. Yeah, it's a nice group, and we appreciate your company. You can come back on some of the other long meetings. We're sometimes here till 11 o'clock if you want to join us. You know where to find us. Yeah. So anyways, thank you everyone, and we do appreciate it. At this point, I'm looking for a motion for trustees to receive the delegations. Moved by trustee Terpstra, seconded by trustee Glauser. So all in favor to receive tonight's delegations? That is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Folks can stick around for the remainder of our meeting. We have another next item is correspondence on this topic, followed by some questions and answers on arcs, which would pertain to this arc, as well as the 3 other arcs that are currently in the process. So once again, thank you for attending. And obviously, thank you to our councillor colleagues, McKenny, who I believe has stepped out, and of course, Minister McMeegan for joining us. Thank you. It's hard to find you. I was looking over there, now you're over here. You move quickly. You're like the Millgrove group, where you just pop up out of nowhere. Okay, so once again, thanks everyone. We are moving to item number 3. There are 37 communication items. My suggestion, but I will let the trustees, is to move all the correspondence as one item. If any trustee wants to speak to a particular item, certainly just let me know and we will do so. So do we have someone to move the items? Moved by trustee Kettle. We have a seconder to move items 1 through 37, trustee Terpstra. Are there any comments or questions on any one of those 37 pieces of correspondence? See, none, just to let folks know that trustees do have printed material of these, and we'll certainly review the material offline. And if there's anything that would like to be brought to our attention, the process is not over. Decision night will be, I believe, May 26th, and we hope to see you perhaps back in this room. So we have the motion to receive the correspondence. All those in favor? That includes trustee Terpstra. Trustee Terpstra? Perfect, thank you very much. So that's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. And now what maybe we'll do is, as folks filter out, and I know Andy needs to set up, we'll take just a 2-minute break, and it's going to set up, and then we'll resume with our trustee questions and answers. It is 9:15, so we should be able to finish this item this evening. So we will reconvene in 2 minutes. Thank you.
How you doing? Good. How many questions are there? I'm leaving.
There's 12.
How long is it going to take?
Burn through. Promise. can do it offline. That won't make any sense. Will anything? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. It's been a long 2 days. We've had a lot of fun together, haven't we? It actually goes back quite a few years when we think about it. In the second part.
All right, thank you, trustees. If you please have your seats. Thank you. So just to remind trustees on the process for this portion of our evening, this is item number 4 on our agenda. Trustee Art questions. The way this process works is that Officer Delvienko will go through the answers to our previously submitted or asked questions. He will go 1 hour at a time. We ask that you save any questions for clarification until he has finished the presentation. And if you ask a question for clarification, please reference the question that you are referring to. Following that, we will move into new questions, and we will go 1 hour at a time, followed, of course, by general questions which may apply to all parts. So we will gladly turn it over to Officer Delvienko to take us through the answers to the previously submitted questions. And perhaps we actually could close just the door to mitigate some of the noise. Alex, can you get the door behind? City Hall. Joey knows how to work City Hall. All right, thank you, Joey. Okay, Dan, when you're ready.
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. There we go. We're back on again. As part of our question and answer period tonight, we have questions and answers from our last standing committee meeting. There are just a handful this time around. We'll start with the Central Mountain.
That's the problem. We can't close the door.
I will yell.
Sorry, Dan, just 1 second.
Go back to
The front doors can close. We have 2 public doors that are accessible, open on the outside. So perhaps, although we're here to quiet down anyways, nonetheless, Dan, go ahead, door open.
Good job.
That was good. Question number 1 from Central Mountain is, are there any hearing impaired classes at Queensdale? The answer is yes. There is a deaf and hard of hearing class at Queensdale. The room they utilize has been specially modified to meet the needs of those students. The second part to that answer is that, in fact, there is no closure of Queensdale being recommended. So therefore, that specialty class is not going to move anywhere under the staff recommendation. How many times have our schools been through an accommodation review? And that's one of the handouts that everybody has in front of them. I know we've received a lot, but it's the one on legal paper. Dating back to 2002. Sorry. No, I have extra copies as well. Please provide examples of successful partnerships at other boards and specific reference to them. So what we've done is we've approached the OASBO Planning Committee and the OASBO Planning...
Sorry, Dan, I just want to get clarification here. reiterate the process. Dan is going through answers of previously asked questions. He's going one arc at a time. We're asking trustees to state their questions until Dan has done the presentation on all 4 arcs. We will then take questions for clarification. So any question that Dan answers, and you may have a question about, record which question it is. You can ask it immediately following his presentation. And then lastly, we are going to accept any new questions that you have on any arcs, and we'll go one arc at a time. So just to be clear, Dan is going through all of the previously asked questions from one arc to the 4th arc, and then we will open it up to questions for clarification first.
Can I have clarification on what you just said, please?
Trustee Fellow,
I'm simply trying to make sure I understood what he said, related to what page. I'm already confused.
okay, so not supposed to just
But when
clarification.
the statement was made, the question was asked about how many they went through and looked at the legal paper. Is this the right one to tell me to understand?
Okay, so the question is not about the process, it's about what we're hearing from
I want to make
the
sure.
officer.
So you want me to wait to take all the way back to say
Exactly.
this speech?
Exactly. So just to be clear, would you like Dan to repeat any answers to any questions?
Yeah, maybe, we can't hear.
Okay, so Dan, if we could just kindly, it has been a long night, it is 9:30, we will be able to get through this item. So Dan, if you could just take us back 1 or 2 steps.
Sure.
We'll go through your entire presentation and then we'll have questions for clarification to follow. Thank you.
Sure. So the question I believe that we are at is how many times have our schools been through an accommodation review? It was asked at the last meeting we had, and what staff was able to do is go back to 2002, and it's on the legal document, and embedded in the legal document is the accommodation review area, the year in which the accommodation review occurred, the schools that were involved in the accommodation review, and the outcome. Unfortunately, it can't fit on the slide, that's why it's on the handout. Another question that came our way involved successful partnerships and examples of successful partnerships in boards in and around us. Now, these are partnerships that are not new builds. These are partnerships that have evolved in existing facilities. So the buildings were already in existence and they were able to secure partners. We specifically put the source in there, and it's from the OASBO Planning Committee. It was a survey of all their member boards, and the 2 that responded that were clear and concise partnerships included Durham Catholic, which has a partnership with Healthcare and Brock Community Health Center, and Simcoe County District School Board, which is also a healthcare partnership. In both cases, they're looking at anywhere between 4 and 8 classrooms, and they charge a per square foot rate. There are other examples of partnerships in new builds all across the province, but this one specifically has to deal with partnerships in existing buildings, which mirrors exactly what we're going through with the accommodation reviews. There were no questions for West Glanbrook. So in West Flamborough, can you please indicate how Spencer Valley and Greensville schools use Webster's Falls and Toes Falls as conservation areas? So the response to this came directly from the principals. Greensville as a support for the science and community heritage parts of their curriculum, and in Spencer Valley makes use of neighboring Christie Conservation Area for get acquainted and health and physical education. Please provide the capacity enrollment by grade for Flamborough Central, Allen Greenleaf, and Balaclava, and they are the October 2013 numbers by grade, as well as the capacities for those schools. How much money, how much renewal money, has been invested in or maintaining the 3 schools over the course of the last 5 years? And you'll see Beverly Central, Millgrove, and Spencer Valley. You'll see the totals from 2008 up until last year, and there's the breakdown. Really, we're talking about floors and upgrades to the water system and the water servicing system, and it's in more detail on the next slide. Please provide the dates and costs related to the septic and well repairs. You'll see that spike in 2009. That's when we switched over to our brand new water system to meet Ministry of Health and Ministry of Environment standards. And it was implemented in 2009, and the costs that we see in 2011, 2012 are really just the annual maintenance and testing So the initial cost at $160 in 2009-10 is the implementation and the putting in the brand new systems, and then it's gone to general maintenance of those systems thereafter. There were no questions for East Hamilton. There were no questions for Central Mountain. So questions that revolve or involve all of the accommodation reviews, and I may need some help on this response. I will read the question. What is the minimum number of students needed in a school in grades 6, 7, and 8 to enable that school to hire 3 additional teachers? And then there's the example, a phys ed teacher, a standalone music teacher. The answer, it takes approximately 700 students to generate 3 teachers for prep time over and above the staffing given the schools for French. How many grade K to 8 schools are being recommended in the Central Mountain and East Hamilton will have this minimum in grades 6, 7, and 8. There are no recommended K to 8 schools within the Central Mountain and East Hamilton accommodation reviews over 700 K to 8 students over the course of the long term. Hillcrest is projected to slightly surpass 700 in the year of implementation, which is 2015 in this case, and then back down below 700 the following years and into the future. And with that concludes the questions. I will make note of a second handout that you received, which is just an amendment to a question by Trustee White earlier on with regards to projections for certain scenarios that the trustee had proposed. There was the summary about the boundaries. We had to just adjust some numbers there to adjust the adding in those numbers. So it's an amendment to that. It has been revised. It will be reposted on the website, and it has been distributed to all trustees.
Thank you, officer. So at this point, are there any questions for clarification on the answers we just heard? Any questions for clarification? Sorry, Trustee Berger? Sorry, any questions for clarification on the answers we just received from Dan? Seeing none, so we move to the next portion, which is where we ask any new questions we have on any ARC. And we're going to move one ARC at a time, all the general questions. Trustee Glauser, a question?
Yes, please. I think I heard at one other meeting that we were going to get hard copies of the actual questions and the responses. Is that still possible? Even tonight, even though there was
Yes, so that was raised last night. The director addressed that. I know our trustee officer is looking into that. So any trustee that wishes to have it, I think it's an automatic, but perhaps if the trustee wants to opt out, we should do that. Perhaps the trustee officer will be in touch. But any trustee that wishes to have our copy will get them. And staff is working on that. Thank you. In your lockers, by the way, that's where you will find them. Trustee Hicks. Wherever, yes. Sorry, Trustee Hicks has the floor. Trustee Hicks.
Not having all the information with me in the book, if the answer to my question is in some material at home, please remind me. But there was a lot of discussion tonight with this on transportation. So what I'd like information on, excuse me, the times for the busing in that ARC that exists today. In other words, it's my understanding that there are some students right today within the school model now that are on the bus for 60 to 70 minutes. So if I could have the total times of the students that are bused now within the schools being considered for the ARC, not the recommendations, but how it stands when they get up tomorrow morning. What's the distance for all those schools?
Thank you. You got that, Dan?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Hicks. So just for clarification, in our first ARC, we will ask for questions appropriately. So we're going to begin with West Flamborough. So Trustee Hicks has already started that off, so why don't we keep the ball rolling? So any questions on West Flamborough? New questions, that is. Trustee Brennan.
Well, I actually don't know if they're new questions. They're new questions to me. That's all I know. It just, I again may need to be reminded, and I shouldn't even be talking to Officer Dan, because of course we're just recording the questions, right? Correct. Just wanted to know why I just wanted to know a little bit more about Queen's Rangers. Like, why was it not in the ARC? When is it going to be in an ARC? And what kind of cluster is it going to be? You know, like what kind of grouping will it be in?
Thank you.
I have a few more. Do you, or do we just want
Next,
to
next question.
No, bounce around.
No.
I'll come back to me.
Okay, but it's still, as long as it's on the topic of the West Flamborough.
It is.
But it's not for clarification.
No, it's not going to change the way. I mean, the answer will be provided one way or another.
It came up in tonight's presentation. Someone mentioned it. I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brennan. Mike is still on, so let's keep asking those questions on West Flamborough. You have the floor. Unless you're not.
I just, I don't want to do too much of a counter on the issue, but, and I might even ask a fellow trustee this question, but what's the Canadian research, and I'm assuming there is, on small versus large schools? And I think the question was asked, what is small and what is large? Because that was not defined by the presenter, even though it was asked. So if there's anything small, anything small on the research side for me to read, I'd be happy to do it. I'd rather not large, but small.
Thank you.
A summary.
Well, I don't want anybody to do too much work. Just give me the link, I'll go read it. Okay, I already did the referral, so, and Wes has already brought up the issue about transportation timing. I did want to ask the question about when we do projections on construction costs, you know, like the school is going to cost $31 million. Are we including what Mr. Baldwin was calling soft costs, like remediation or any other things that are going on before we in fact pour concrete? I just don't know if that gets added in or is it something else.
Thank you.
I think, and I think I really, this is more of a general ARC question, so maybe I'll wait until the end.
Please, thank you. Further questions on West Flamborough? Trustee Petal.
I'd like to understand why staff is recommending the Spencer Valley location for rebuild as opposed to Greens got wrong. Sorry, my voice might
Okay, so why the one side over the other? Thank you. Next question, or that is it. Thank you. Trustee Simmons.
Trustee Petal stole my question.
Imagine we're thinking alike.
Very, very scary. From over here, I'm hysterical.
He's stuck in emotion last night.
We're going to watch out. This is turning into a policy meeting. Trustee Turkstrad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple questions. One of them is that there was a gentleman tonight who produced a piece of paper from Hamilton Lumber Student Transportation Services that clearly stated that it was above policy. It was over the 60 minutes in writing. We know that it happens with inclement weather. We know that it happens with accidents and whatnot, but why on earth would we send out a piece of paper that goes outside of our policy? So I want to know how many of those pieces of paper exist, and why would that not be flagged, and then some kind of transportation correction would be made for that busing route, because we have a policy. So that's that question.
Thank you.
The second one I have is I really would like to know about the renewal needs for Millgrove Public School in years 1 to 5, especially for the high and urgent. When was the last time that was actually, let's say, audited by staff? And is it based purely on the life cycle, or are those actual real costs that we foresee in 1 to 5 years? The other question I have.
Did you get that then? Yeah, okay. Next question, thanks.
I'm good.
We're good, we're good.
The other question I have is, should we have to do some kind of renovation if we can't get ministry funding for whatever we do? I was just wondering about what is the cost of because we have split schools, we have JK to 5 and then we have 6, 7, 8s. What is the cost of adding FDK additions in classrooms versus middle school amenities of proper music rooms, proper science rooms, proper art rooms, and then of course middle school appropriate gymnasiums? So what are those differing costs? Because that may influence decision making later on.
Thank you.
That's what I have to right now.
Thank you, Trustee Trickster. Further questions on West Flamborough? Seeing none, we'll go to West Glenbrook. Any questions on West Glenbrook? Trustee Bishop.
Mr. Chairman, the question we just had from Trustee Trickster seems to me is more general than just to West Flamborough. I think we'd like to know that also for other schools that have been considered from turning from the JK to 5 into a JK to 8 school.
Thank you. Staff has noted that. So questions on West Glenbrook. New questions on West Flamborough? Seeing none. New questions on East Hamilton? New questions on East Hamilton? I do have one, so I'll just read my question into the record. I'll also email it. And that is, once again, thanks for the corrected scenario 1 and 2 that was handed out. My follow-up question to that is, number 1, can staff please revise the scenarios, rather scenario 2, to address the latest top-up funding announcements and adjust the boundaries accordingly? And my second question for that scenario is, once again, can staff in that same revision also consider the latest enrollment impacts of FDK on the remaining schools? Good, thank you. Okay, further questions on East Hamilton? Seeing none. Central Mountain. New questions on Central Mountain? Seeing none. Last but not least, any general questions? I know Trustee Brennan has one. Trustee Brennan.
It comes up all the time, and it occasionally we seem to be slammed a bit. And so I really would like Mr. Chair to know, or at least have a statement on how we do our projections. What are the sort of, well, the formula or the matrix of different kinds of studies or whatever it is we do on our projections, however we do it. And then, given, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing, given the fact that most of these arcs started 7 or 8 months ago, are there any recent updates to any of the pieces that you would have been used to calculate numbers? In other words, are there any, just repeat what we just said. So, there you go.
Thank you. Further general questions, Trustee Hicks?
Just a general question, and maybe the director could help answer this as well. His meetings with the other directors of the board. Is there any new direction as far as defining rural versus urban, with the direction from the ministry to fund and their thoughts on school closures? I've been on their website and I've read a few things that they might be thinking of treating rural versus urban schools, how they treat them, and the guidelines for closure and funding and so forth. So I was just wondering if there's anything new coming from the ministry on that. I don't need the answer tonight, but I'm sure that they're thinking of looking at that whole scenario in relationship to closing schools.
Thank you, Trustee Hicks. First time questions, or speakers rather, on general questions, new general questions. Seeing none, trustee Brennan again.
It's Wes's fault for coming up with a question that prompted me to remind myself of another question. And that is essentially, if we're using remote rural as a definition through the Ministry of Education, we have some neighboring boards that I think probably have schools like we have up in West Flamborough. So are they managed in any other way? In other words, is there any other place near us with the same kind of demographics perhaps, or the layouts of the schools that might just give us some information on how they manage to consider those schools? We certainly wouldn't qualify as remote rural the way it is in Northern Ontario. But there must be other issues about rural schools that we call rural schools, not classified by the ministry that way, but clearly have some of the characteristics we have.
Thank you. And last time, any new questions, general questions? Seeing none, we have a motion. Sorry, trustee Orban.
The only one that I'd like to get some comments on with regard to ministry. In the urban areas, we have small schools. They've been around for years. And then we have in clusters, senior and a junior school, and some of them are being consolidated. So I'd like to know the difference, how we handle a rural small school versus a urban small school, because they're very different. And then there's the northern rural small school. And a few years ago, they built the schools side by side, 200 in each, and only had 50 kids in them. One was the public, and the other one was a French community. And the ministry accepted that and paid for it. So there is different ways the money is spent through ministry funding. So I'm just wondering how that fares with us, because we look like we're on the process of going JK to 8. Then earlier we had campus, and still earlier we had small schools. And we thought they were all great in that particular era of time.
Thank you, trustee Orban. I think staff have that, and we'll come back to that next week. I do not have any other speakers. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by trustee Hicks, seconded by trustee Brennan. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, and everyone have a great evening.